Good afternoon. I call the Menifee City Council Budget Workshop to order. Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Councilmember August. Councilmember Leesmeyer. Mayor Pro Tem Denver.
Here.
Mayor Mann.
Here.
Thank you.
Mr. Johnson, take us where you need us to go.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Tonight we have a budget workshop to explain and to provide some information about our upcoming budget process, procedure, and to share with you where we are with our annual operating budget and our capital improvement program. I will have, let me see here, I'll have the introduction and do some city manager comments, and then I'll hand it over to Finance Director Foltz, who will be sharing with you the annual operating budget. And then at any point in time, if you'd like discussion, feel free. A free-flowing workshop is just fine with us. So just look at our city profile and how it's changed. Our population as of May 1st, 2015 is now 85,385 people. That's up 2% from last year. Median age is 38 years old. That stays constant from last year. Our average household income is $67,318, which is up 14.5%. April median home price of 2015 is $290,771. That's up 9% from April of last year. We were the second fastest growing city in Riverside County in 2014 and the sixth fastest growing city in the state. I'm not exactly sure where we are now, but those are on the books from 2014. Earlier this year, we did a legacy workshop with council to get a consensus of priorities, and this is a slide depicting where we are with those. There were basically 5 different areas that council provided input and projects to staff. Economic development comprised 22 different items, and these items are combined from all council members who participated in the legacy workshop. 22 items for economic development, 16 items in public safety, 10 items in financial stability. The title was just called finance. Public facilities master plan or plans, there were 15 items under that and 27 items under policy setting. The council shared and discussed those issues and projects by district at the legacy workshop to provide staff with direction over the next several years. Quarterly, the city manager will update council on the 90 items listed by category and by council member district. After the budget adoption, staff will add the legacy items to the city's website on the council page. So whether or not the legacy items are identified directly in the budget itself with line items and dollar amounts attached to them, which is typically not how a general fund or municipal budget works, those are all items that staff will be working on starting this coming fiscal year and into the future until they're either accomplished or they're changed, or an item might be brought back to council for a particular, hey, we need this moved up. You need to get this done right away, staff, and a policy direction or setting would take place at that point in time. Let's take a look at our fiscal years coming up for 2016 through 20, the capital improvement program. We have and displayed everywhere 7 major infrastructure capital projects totaling about $100 million. We have $100 million programmed over the next 5 years to complete the projects. We completed 6.8 million of them with Menifee Missing Link and Newport Road widening. We have 45.9 million funded currently. That's 34 million on the Newport I-215 interchange. If any of you had difficulty getting here, that is because of that. We have 9 million dedicated and funded to the Scott Road I-215 interchange right away, which is ongoing. By the way, those plans are 100% complete now for the Scott Road interchange. We have 1.37 million dedicated to the Holland Road final design. That's about 50 to 55% complete now. 500,000 to McCall interchange for the preliminary design, and that's about a third of the way completed. And then 1.1 million on the Bradley Bridge final design, which we have shipped back out to do some dollar cost averaging on engineering so that we can get the cost of that project down to a manageable level. We also had have seven general capital improvement projects. We have 6.4 million in total project costs. 205,000 of those have been completed last year with the Quell Valley chip seal resurfacing project. We currently have 6.2 million funded. That's 4.2 million to construct the new Sun City Fire Station number 7, $548,000 in traffic signal installations at Aldergate and Menifee and Holland and Bradley, which are being final design completed and should be ready to go, we're hoping, on summer break, so we can get those installed before school starts in the fall. There's $329,000 for Encanto Drive resurfacing from McCall to Coronado. That is a project in conjunction with the Encanto Apartments. It's been long awaited. There were some issues there. It was determined by our city engineer, who looked through several different maps, that that's actually in a flood zone. It wasn't known that prior. We had to jump through some hoops on the FEMA and federal levels, and they have agreed to allow us to move forward on that project. It is in final design now. $200,000 for Newport. This is Hahn to Bradley resurfacing design. This is in conjunction with the Regent Town Center and in cooperation with Regent and their TUMF agreement, which we're working on now, to provide Newport from Hahn to Bradley that would look very similar to the east side of Newport from Antelope to Menifee Road, and $522,000 in safe routes to school, Antelope, Watson, and Highway 74. We also have another $400,000 going to the Garboni Antelope widening for the traffic signal there, with $311,000 coming from a developer. We also have community services capital improvement projects. There's $651,000 in total projects. $459,000 of those are coming through the CDBG program. We've completed $192,000 worth of those, $155,000 on the playground improvements at Peterson, Marsh, Rancho Ramona, and Nova Park, $37,000 on Phase 3 of Cherry Hills Boulevard landscape improvement. $459,000 is currently funded and under construction, with the Case Sinicero Center improvements leading the way, with $274,000 on the exterior improvements, which was if you've driven by, it's starting to look very beautiful. Wall removal, parking lot resurface, ADA ramps, sidewalks. $30,000 of that is set aside for the new landscaping, which will be the point-to-point drip irrigation, no turf, water-wise plants and trees. $155,000 on the interior improvements for an ADA restroom retrofit, toilets, countertops, projector screen, electronic upgrades, and flooring and paint. Moving into the annual operating budget for the upcoming fiscal year 2015-16, we are currently riding the wave of odd versus even years. And so this message is not going to be a fun one to hear, but I think we've all heard the story several times over and over. We're in a situation where it seems like every other year we have an issue, we have increased revenue, we have an issue. We believe that 2015 and 16 will be the year that we come back to revenue positive, and that goes back into the general fund unallocated fund balance. As you know, sales tax and property tax are not keeping pace with our annual increases in expenses. And that's just an overgeneral statement, but I'll go into that in a little more detail. We do have a true revenue issue. We do not have an expense issue here at City Hall in Menifee. With our loss of VLF this fiscal year, that now calculates to $4.2 million based on our population and a $50 per capita per person. We have reduced our expenses by $4.7 million going into next year. That is a very, very large number. If you recall, last year it was about 2.3, so it almost doubled this year. We have increased public safety, increased cost of doing business in general, not only with general CPIs and cost of living around us with the contracts that we have, the rates that were provided, also increased PERS rates, insurance, PARSAC have gone up. We need to solve the revenue issue outside of the VLF issue until California votes in a new governor. I think we all know that. We've gone 3 times now, and we believe that if we went another time, that we heard from the governor's office that there's already a veto in place, so there's no real reason to go forward with the bill. The win that we believe Senator Roth was claiming does not affect us to the tune of anything that's substantial or ongoing. It basically helps the city of Jurupa Valley on a $21 to $22 million repayment to the county, which we do not have. So I think we escaped that win with about $1,057,000, which we're counting toward revenue in the next fiscal year, which we will debate and talk to the county about making sure we get. We reviewed all department head requests, and frankly, we got good at saying no. That's really why we were able to trim our $4.7 million. Most of those were requests. Not only each one of our department heads knows the impacts that they have to their own area, and it would be nice to have additional bodies. It would be nice to have additional equipment. Currently, we, quite frankly, just can't afford it. So we've stayed status quo. We've moved staff to appropriate non-general fund cost centers to accurately depict the role and funding sources. That's another way that we cut down that $4.7 million. We have a community services department that was basically created through CFD and CSAs, and that actually alleviated $40,000 off the general fund by making sure those cost centers were appropriate and depicting the roles and funding sources. Public Works and Engineering, same way. We are able to bring on some new staff, and Bruce is going to show you exactly how we did that, but what we're looking at is a street maintenance graffiti worker and a public works inspector, and basically what we've done is made that expense or revenue neutral. What I mean by that is those folks that we currently have or don't have right now in that position, the graffiti worker position, we acquired a trailer and some graffiti removal equipment from the county that was being resourced and allocated and sitting there. We actually approached them, and they actually gave it to us at a very, I would say gave it because it's probably $30,000 or $40,000 worth of equipment for about $8,000. We did acquire a vehicle last year that will allow our graffiti street maintenance worker to get out in the field. And as soon as we move forward with an approved budget, we can go for recruitment. We can also offer those services on graffiti removal to the county and charge them back, and to possibly some of our local cities, Paris, Canyon Lake, Lake Elsinore. Expense neutral means we have development fees that we're paying the cost of consultants or contractors. We have, our plan is to remove those contractors and consultants and reduce the expenses that are charged to development fees for to pay for that service. However, when you do that, you have to reduce the revenue too. So it's not a hurt for us at all. It's actually a win, and it's revenue and expense neutral because we have now some additional employees that can multitask instead of follow a scope of work, and so they can do a number of other things as assigned. Just a couple of blank statements, but until we can control the costs of public safety, we need an alternative revenue outside of the VLF and sales and property tax to solve our continuous annual budget shortfall. There's only so much more that we can cut out of our budget cycle. An interesting note, during Temecula's budget workshop, the council discussed and directed the city manager to bring back a plan in 30 days to set a timetable to solicit community feedback to assess what options to take with respect to unsustainable public safety costs. What does that mean? The council asked the city manager to formulate a plan to go into the community to talk about the fact that their budget needs are growing on the public safety side, and they're not meeting it on the revenue side. So if our region's economic giant is researching options, I would suggest that respectfully that we should do that as well. Those options may include, and this will all be vetted through the public, CFDs for public safety. We did attempt that. I understand it's not popular, and there were other ways to go about what we were doing. Council offered a couple other things, and they fall right in line with what Temecula's thinking. A half-cent sales tax measure, a utility user tax, and any other ideas that folks come up with. Their thought is, let's activate the community and get them involved in solving the problem. I have had a conversation with Mr. Adams and Mr. Yates and Elsinore, and with your blessing, I would love to continue those discussions to see which way they're going to move in that.
Mr. Mayor, question? No. When do you foresee those, when do you see the revenues versus expenditures when the expenditures are going to go over the revenues?
They did last year. We
They
cut
did last
$2.5
year.
million last year.
2.5, 4.5 this year, so we're already
Correct.
on the other side of the curve on that.
Correct.
All right.
So they're looking at possibly a ballot measure in November 2016 based on the feedback they get from the community.
Another question, as far as a Temecula workshop, I know this is a council-generated workshop and activity, but is there any way we can put anybody from our city in to stay abreast of what they're doing, or would you rather wait until it's over?
Well, I'm asking that that be me,
That'd be you?
yeah,
Okay.
so that I can work with Aaron Adams, the city manager in Temecula.
Any objection to the city manager performing his job?
No.
Okay. Hearing
Thank you.
none.
The department percentage change from fiscal year 2014 to 15, city council was reduced by 15%, city manager by 18%, city attorney by 5%, city clerk 9%, administrative services 29%, finance 0.52, planning did increase, building did increase, code enforcement decreased, economic development decreased, public works and engineering increased by almost 1%. Community services increased by 7.45, but that's not on the general fund. That's out of the CSAs. Our challenge is cutting back in certain departments to expand in others. We know that development right now is carrying us. So we need to make sure that those departments that assist development with continuing to work are increased and afforded the opportunity to continue everybody working and everybody building.
Mr. August.
Mr. Mayor, the reason why I mention that is because I believe at the last council meeting, you delegated it to the Public Safety Committee, something that seems similar to what Temecula is doing. So would we not, when you designated the look at public safety into the Public Safety Committee, would it not be wise not to do that at this time and let Mr. Johnson do that for us?
Mr. Johnson?
Well, I apologize for jumping in, but I think it's a two-pronged approach. I think what Temecula is doing is twofold. One, they're going into the community to see what the community thinks how they could possibly help solve the equation. But the other side of it is we do know that public safety costs are rising, and there needs to be a two-pronged approach. Not only how are we going to identify opportunities for additional revenue, but also how do we maintain the rising cost of public safety. So I think it's a two-pronged approach. There were some cities that got together and had a meeting informally, and we had Mr. Leesmeyer attend that. I think those meetings will continue, and we should probably have a presence in them.
So, Mr. Mayor, do you continue to want the Safety Committee to look into that?
No. I think the Public Safety Committee needs to continue doing what it's doing in concert with Public Safety, and with a fully agendized meeting and go down the normal path of taking care of stuff. I think the city manager can take care of staffing out these future issues and bringing those back to us at a later time.
Thank you.
Do you agree?
I do.
Yeah.
There's some positives here. I didn't want to be all negative. So not only do we have obviously a lot going on, you saw it when you drove here. There's a lot of construction. There's a lot happening. There are amenities and improvements going on throughout the city, and that's a great thing. We also have a focused and aggressive economic development department and a person that over the past 3 years has improved our retail commercial position in the region. We've welcomed significant contributors to sales tax, revenue generation for the city by continuing those relationships, and market the city at both ICSC venues and as well as others. We saw Applebee's, Five Guys, Jersey Mike's, and Flame Broiler come in this fiscal year, and it's very difficult to get a parking spot over there. So they're doing very well. So we know that the more that we continue to welcome new businesses in, obviously eating establishments are a high priority, with a couple of others that are coming down the road. Not to forget that Ulta, Justice, Marco's Pizza opened as well. We also welcomed our first brewing company and tasting room to the city last year, opening Mason Jar Brewing Company. We welcomed our first light industrial development on Commerce Point on Ziders Road. And there are several new retail commercial centers that were approved in 2014-15 that are under construction. So we'll see the benefits of those in this coming fiscal year. And I've listed them here with the Town Center Marketplace and the sundry of retail and food establishments that are coming. The Menifee Lakes Plaza featuring LA Fitness, but we have New Hub Auto Air, the Stater Brothers Shopping Center featuring the Blue Ribbon Market and several outbuildings. International Auto Crafters was approved. America's Tire Store was approved, and that's the fencing that's going up there just north of the school district and just south of Circle K right there on Hahn. Heritage Shopping Center on Menifee and McCall was approved. The AMPM and Car Wash is almost complete and open. O'Reilly Auto Parts is almost complete and open. Retail commercial development is providing the amenities that residents need and keeps our sales tax within our city limits. It'll be very interesting in the middle of next year. We will be doing another study to see what that leakage number is. It's been well established. It was over $400 million in sales tax a year. Hopefully we've made it a dent in that. I believe we have. I'm going to turn this over to our finance director in a moment here, but you know, Bruce has been a real godsend for us. He got here and he started pouring over the last 3 years of our financials to get a handle on this, what we're calling a roller coaster or riding the wave. He's dissected our past budgets. He came at mid-year and made a very tough decision to reduce our revenue estimates. And he determined to get us on the right path with controlling our expenses and being realistic with our revenue opportunities. Instead of putting a benchmark revenue out there that we hope to hit, we're putting one that we know that we will. And I think that's important as we move forward. He did have the unenviable task of trying to and accomplishing a $4.7 million cut in expenses to balance the budget. We did that through cuts across the board. No department was spared. I got to hand it to our department head staff and our management team. You know, they have a lot of questions still to this day, and I'm not going to pull any punches here. They don't know what their budget numbers are right now, but we do know we are balanced. We will be meeting with them after this budget workshop is over, and we'll be making sure certain of exactly the things that they need within their budget means. But again, we reduce budgets, and they'll have to make accommodations based on those reductions. We're looking at our organization to identify ways to improve performance and decrease expenses. These sounds like kind of contrite things or no-brainers, but we also need to look at all areas to make sure that we're using our finite resources to the best interest of the city. If there are things that we're doing and we have no reason why we're doing them and we're causing us to expend funds, then we need to stop, or we need to look at, we need to reevaluate. The focus of the next year will be efficiency over expense. If efficiency causes the expense, you know, we can't afford to do that right now. So we need to table some of those things. We need to continually look at reducing our expenses, especially off the general fund, but honestly, not much remains to reduce. We will reduce contracts with outside agencies, vendors, if that allows us to adjust our budget. So in all, 9.5% increase in revenue and expense. Before I turn it over to Bruce, I just want to recognize him out loud in front of everyone and thank him. Bruce, you did a wonderful job. Wendy, your finance team that has 4 people in it. Special thanks again to you and your staff, Crystal and Anne-Marie as well. And to the department heads, they're going to do more with less again. This is the mantra that I've asked them to do. We still smile and laugh. We take our jobs very seriously, but I think you've seen us enough in the office that we don't take ourselves very seriously. There's not a foot that gets hurt when we get stepped on. We move out of the way. We find a solution, and my hat's off to them. They're going to continue, and I will as well, to willingly serve and build this community, and I think that's phenomenal of our staff. Very appreciative of them and proud to work with them. So I'm going to turn the numbers piece over to Bruce Foltz, your finance director. If you do me a favor and pass that down, we have one clicker between the two of us.
It's a tight budget.
So, it's a tight budget, that's right.
Can't afford a clicker.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I want to go over the budget kind of in detail. Not every line item, but just kind of overview. Budgeting in itself is not a hard concept. I think we all do it in our personal lives. We kind of analyze how much money we have coming in, how much expenses we have. And what we do in government is pretty much identical, except for in government, everything we do it more difficult. We make it more challenging. And this by far is one of the challenging budgets I've ever worked on. I worked on quite a few budgets in my career, and this was one of the most challenging. So I just want to go through the budget process of how we formulated the budget, so you have a good understanding that our numbers are just not far-fetched. That there's a lot of study and analysis that goes into the process. So really, we start our budget process in January. We kind of look at the current year's operating financial statements and see where we stand. So by January, we have a really good look at the current year's financials of the first 6 months. So we have roughly 6 months of sales tax coming in, 6 months of property tax revenue, and those two individual revenue streams are our biggest sources of revenue in the general fund. So based on the first 6 months of the year, of the current year that we're operating in, we kind of start forecasting into next year. And then that leads us into February. We start off with a kickoff meeting with the city manager and myself, meeting with all the department heads, giving a little bit of guidance of what we expect in the future months ahead in the budget. We ask them to prepare the individual line items within their own department budgets, and we ask them to actually input the data into our accounting software. So that information comes back, and we ask them to do that around March. And then in April, I have all this data coming back, and myself and my finance team, that's when the fun really starts, because we start out with projections of revenues here, and then with everybody's budget, individual budget, we have expenses here. So the challenge is how do you get the two to match? And that's a process that is very time-consuming and very painful at times to go over and over and over, reanalyzing revenues. Are we overestimating revenues? Are we underestimating revenues? Looking at expenditures, where can we cut? What's critical? What is not critical? Unfortunately, I feel like we're in a kind of a defensive mode, and we're at a point where it comes down, is a want or need? Is it something we really want, or is it something we need? And like even in our home budget, fortunately, most of us have a 30-year mortgage. That's kind of a fixed rate over 30 years, hopefully, unless you have a variable. But all of a sudden, that started increasing 8% year after year, and you're on a fixed income. That becomes very challenging. And those are some of the challenges that we face here with this upcoming budget. So by May, the city manager and I sit down and I present to him the working draft of what I've been able to prepare, and with a few modifications from the city manager in May. Here we are in June with a budget workshop, and hopefully adoption by the second meeting in June. So some of the assumptions going into this budget, property tax revenues, we're expecting to go up roughly 6.5%. Across the board in Riverside County, the assessor has informed me that all assessed values will go up based on their calculations, almost 2%. And so automatically, that's a good portion of the increase. And within the city of Menifee, our continued expected growth, kind of estimating roughly 4.5%, making the total 6.5%. Sales tax, we're expecting to go up on the normal basis, roughly 3.7%. We have received information from an independent consultant that gives us some preliminary figures for our sales tax. Based on those figures, the triple flip, which is started back in, I believe, 2002, or thereabouts, and will be final this coming fiscal year. And because of that process of it finalizing, we should actually receive an extra $400,000 at the end of the year. And so that's an extra bump. So collectively, comparing last year's figures, current year's budget figures to next year's forecasted, the increase is almost 10%. The franchise fees, we expect to go up 4.2%. Our solid waste hauler, they'll be increasing their fees to their customers, which will also increase their revenues, their franchise fees to us. As more houses come online, there'll be more cable, utilities being utilized, so we expect continued growth in that department. Building permits, we're actually, the way the calculation comes out is actually showing a decrease of 5.4%. We're not really so much saying that building is going to go down, we're just being conservative. And as I go through the figures, the difference is a little over $200,000. But being a little conservative, not overly conservative, but based on the first really 8 months of this current fiscal year, the building permit figures that were coming in were not as generous as we thought. But over the last several months, March, April, May, they've been really well, very phenomenal. So very positive last 3 months. Hopefully that will carry us through at least the first half of next year. And we'll be able to not only meet our projection, but go over our projection. General liability insurance, that is going up 38.5%. That's roughly $48,000, as well as workers' comp insurance, that's going up 23.3%, a total of $26,000.
A question for you.
Yes.
Have we ever gone out to an RFP, Mr. Manager, since we joined Parsac? Have we ever validated those rates? Have we ever gone out?
No, we have not.
Okay. We may, I'm not asking for it, maybe that's a
I
discussion
agree.
for another day, but perhaps it's been, we're on our 7th year with Parsac,
Yes.
and maybe it's time to take a look at other JPAs.
One of the key factors of reason the rates have gone up is twofold. One, our payroll estimates for next year are increasing because we are taking on 11 new positions, which is increases both the general liability and workers' comp.
That would increase the work comp, not general liability.
It will increase the general liability because that is a derivative of their formula, is based on wages. It's not solely wages, but it's a derivative of the calculation.
Another
That's all.
reason to maybe shop around.
And then because we are in the JPA, they do a retroactive look back, retrospect, and so we're having to pay an extra underpaid in prior years, so they're asking us to kick in another $5,000 to replenish the fund. And then a little bit of good news. It looks like good news on the surface, but it'll probably change the following year. It's actually PERS. Our PERS rate for the current year, the employer portion, for the classic employee is 17.69%, will reduce next year to roughly 12%. The reason we have such a drop in the percentage is because CalPERS has actually changed their methodology of calculating the employer's portion. The reason the rate is higher this year versus next year is because of the unfunded liability. The old formula would calculate the unfunded liability within the employer rate. From future years now, because of their change in methodology, we'll pay the employer rate based on current employees, and then the unfunded portion of the liability will be a separate billing. So that $9,495 will be our portion of our unfunded liability. We are such a young city, and our total unfunded liability calculation for next year is a little over $138,000. So very small compared to other cities that have been around for a number of years, and it has a really large payroll. Just a little glance here of kind of comparing our city population versus our staffing, just kind of some information, food for thought. As you can see, we've grown over the years. These figures, population figures, are coming from the Department of Finance, and it's a steady growth of 2% each year. The current year figures there of 85,000 in population is straight from the Department of Finance. I'm projecting that next year will increase roughly 2%. And as you can see, current staffing level for this fiscal year is 45, and we'll be increasing that by 11 employees next year. Those 11 employees, as we mentioned earlier, are all currently being covered under some type of a contract. Basically, we're swapping one contract or another for employees. The first 8 employees on this sheet represent the Park and Recreation, which is really a substitute for a valley-wide contract. And then we have 2 employees here for Public Works, which are also through contract or labor that we currently have, where we bring that workforce in-house, and one employee in the Building and Safety Department. Oops. Property tax in general, the property tax distribution on $1 of revenue is distributed throughout the county in various buckets, as you may say. The school receives 22 cents for every dollar of property tax revenue. The county receives 24 cents. Other category represents special districts such as the water district and bond payment. And you can see there we have 2 categories that we receive as the City of Menifee General Fund category and the City of Menifee Fire Fund. Both are at 6 cents on the dollar. So for every dollar we receive, every dollar of property tax, we actually receive 12 cents. Another way to really look at this from a pragmatic perspective, if we take assessed value of a property house of $300,000, the ad valorem rate of 1% will generate a rate of $3,000. And that's strictly the ad valorem portion. As you know, on any property tax bill, there's other add-ons, special assessments, but this is basically based on strictly the 1%. Of that 1%, you can see the 2 categories that the City of Menifee would receive would represent only $382 out of the $3,000. So as we see a lot of homes going up, the kind of the misconception, I believe, of a lot of people is that we should be getting a lot of property tax from all those homes, but unfortunately, we receive a very small portion of their property tax. So it's kind of phenomenal. Out of a $300,000 house, one house, we receive less than $400 a year for property tax. Sales tax, the state-based sales tax rate is 6.5%. There's the Bradley Burns of 1%, which is designed to go to local governments. And then within Riverside County, we have the Measure A, which is a 0.5% sales tax. So total sales tax within Riverside County is 8%. The Bradley Burns is actually broken up into 2 components, but the city does receive a full 1% on all sales tax. So just a little analogy there, for a $30,000 car, total sales tax would be $2,400. The city would receive $300. If we find a pair of golf clubs for $300, we get $3. A cup of coffee for $3, we get 3 cents. And then groceries, most groceries are not taxable. And so unfortunately, grocery stores are not a big tax winner for us. A little thing about sales tax is the typical rule with sales tax, if you're buying it from a restaurant, if it's warmed, it means it was prepared. And so the kind of rule of thumb, it's not 100%, but kind of the rule of thumb is if it's warm and if it's prepared, it's taxable. But if it's cold, it's not prepared, so it's not taxable. So when I go to Starbucks, I ask for cold coffee. So I'd like to go into the general fund revenues. And our biggest revenue sources for the general fund is property tax, sales tax, franchise fees, and building permits, which is developer fees. And as you can see, we're projecting next year property tax to be at 36% of our total general fund revenues, followed by a sales tax. And those 2 are our biggest revenue streams for the general fund. A little comparison of the current year operating budget to next year's projections. As you can see, property tax will come in. We're projecting $10.6 million, an increase of 6.5%. Sales tax, as I mentioned earlier, because of the winding down of the triple flip, we're projecting to get an extra $400,000. That percentage increase is kind of skewed a little higher than expected. That is not normal, so that's a one-time influx of an extra $400,000. The developer fees, which are the building permits, as I mentioned earlier, we're projecting actually a decrease of 5.4%. Again, that's kind of a conservative number, and It's not that we think development is going to actually stop or slow down by any means. We're just being conservative based on kind of what the first 6 months of this current fiscal year that we're in. And franchise fees should be increasing next year. And then the county augmentation, that goes up 3% per year, and that will be sunsetting in fiscal year 2017/18. And then other revenue, we typically do not show that type of an increase in other revenues. The primary reason we show an increase is what we're expecting based on the governor's recommendations that the county would fund us the transition loan back to us. As we continue to look at the general fund, total expenditures for the general fund for next year will be $29.6 million. By far, public safety, excuse me, makes up the biggest majority of our total operating expenditures for the general fund at 64%. And you can see we have administrative services, which basically makes up the accounting department, the city clerk's office, and city manager's office, and we have public works at 9%. Although more of a breakdown of the general fund expenditures, again, with public safety coming in at 19 million out of our total budget of 29 million, followed by administrative services is the next highest portion of our general fund.
Does your, if I may,
Sure.
back up?
Sure.
Does the public safety cost, is that just law and fire, or do you include code enforcement in that figure?
These figures represent just strictly fire and police.
So what would public safety be if you added in code enforcement?
The code enforcement figures are actually located, are blended into the building and safety figure of 1.5.
Okay, so what would the public safety percentage be if you counted that into public safety?
The public safety code enforcement is roughly about half of that, half of the 1.5 figure. So about an extra 700,000 would be moved up.
Thank you. Mr. August?
Question, the numbers that the mayor was just talking about, police and fire, it also includes animal control, which is probably around 2%, correct?
And this actual presentation, we've moved animal services down into administration.
Okay.
And so strictly the public safety only represents fire and police.
Fire and police, and for your 64%, does that represent bringing on any new officers or keeping us pretty much where we are?
No, that's status quo, where we are this year. No additional officers.
No additional officers? Okay, thank you.
And then summary of the general fund, we total estimated revenues of $29.6 million, total operating expenditures $29.6 million, with a balanced budget of no additional surplus or deficit. So kind of a hypothetical scenario, if we kind of isolate general fund revenues, and if we were to designate certain revenue streams to offset certain expenditures, if we were to break down property tax, isolate just strictly property tax and sales tax for public safety, and then all other revenues through the general fund to run all other government operations, what would that look like?
Mr. August?
Yes.
Go ahead and finish.
Okay. So this slide is kind of taking that concept into place. If we were to try to color code this, so the red represents fire and blue represents police, and the green is revenues coming in. So looking back over the past 5 years, or past 4 years, and then next year, if we compare sales tax, only sales tax, 100% of the sales tax and 100% of the property tax to run public safety, as you can tell, there at the bottom, each year there's a shortfall, and each year, as you can tell over time, it increases that shortfall, starting out at 1.3 and then projecting for next year at a little over $2 million. And so what that kind of tells me is, it's our revenues from property tax and sales tax are not sufficient to run strictly public safety. If we look at the other revenues and expenses in the general fund excluding public safety, that would be franchise fees and developer deposits, or excuse me, building permits and license. For each year, over the past several years, we would be running a surplus. So if you look at fiscal year 13-14, where we had the $2.9 million, that was the year that we really had a phenomenal growth in building permits. And so that's what really helped to create that surplus. And then next year, in fiscal year 15-16, a part of that $2 million would represent the $1 million of the transition loan coming in from the county. If we look at the other funds collectively, they're a much smaller portion of our operating budget, but just equally as important. We have the gas tax Measure A, which are both used for public roads and a little bit of capital. We have a beginning fund balance in each one of these funds. So over time, we don't always use the revenues that come in. So particularly in the DIF fund, the developer impact fees. Typically revenues come in over time. We hold those revenues until we actually have a project, and then we start spending them. So as you can see, if you look at the total revenues that we're projecting for all these other funds, total revenues would be 11.3 million versus expenditures of 35.8 million. And the reason being is capital project. The 20 million that we have in fund balance is revenue that we received from the TIP loan, the bond proceeds, and we will be spending those next year and then the following year for the construction of the Newport Road interchange. So citywide, if we look at general fund revenues, if we look at total general fund and other funds, the total for the citywide revenues coming in would be 41 million, and then total expenditures citywide would be 95 million. And I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Can you back up that one slide?
One more?
Lucy, you have some splaining to do on this slide. I don't understand what you're trying to portray here.
Okay. Basically, if you isolate just the general fund, we have revenues and expenditures, and you can see they're the same number because the revenues are coming in, and we have matching expenditures that equal our
Okay,
revenues.
so that's balanced. The general fund's balanced.
The general fund is balanced. The other funds, while they may look like they're not in balance in a particular year because of we have beginning fund balance that we'll be using, for example, the capital project of 20 million that we have in savings. We actually had received those funds in a prior year. We've been holding them until the construction invoices actually come in for Newport. So over the next year and a half or so, we will start spending that $20 million. And so the only thing I wanted to represent here is just totally citywide. If you look at not only the general fund, but look at all the other funds, the total revenue coming in from all sources would be 41 million, and total expenditures going out would be 95 million.
Assuming that you paid everything tomorrow.
Within the next fiscal year,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
So I don't like that slide. It kind of misrepresents the facts. Mr. August.
Question. Budget. How much of our forecast and budget is dependent on new housing? And it looks to me to be pretty significant as far as what the city's future is on property taxes, building permits, and things like that. Should the housing market go flat all of a sudden into a slump, another recession perhaps, what effect on the city, what effect on our budget would something like that have?
If we actually went into a recession, we're actually projecting a roughly 4.5% growth rate for next year. So that would be flat line. The unfortunate thing with a recession is if the assessed values stay consistent without being readjusted by the county assessor's office, if they stay flat, that's one thing. If they get readjusted by the county assessor's office, that means less property tax revenue would actually come in. And we did fall into another recession. The big ticket items, such as buying washing machines, dryers, big screen TVs, sales tax revenue would also be reduced because people would start realizing it's cheaper to eat at home than going out to a restaurant to eat.
We're very heavily dependent on housing, an increasing housing market.
One of the slides I was projecting is sales tax increase of roughly 3.7% for next year. So we are expecting growth, and we are, yes, to some degree dependent on growth.
Mr. Leesmeyer?
On the upcoming projects that Rob talked about, there's a whole page of upcoming projects. How conservative were your projections on sales tax increase? I mean, you said 10.6. What's that based on? Is that including those projects, or are those projects going to be icing on the cake?
Those projects are funded outside of sales tax. So the sales tax and property tax are used strictly for the general fund, which is the day-to-day operations. The capital projects are funded either through the bond proceeds that we issued or through developer impact fees.
No, I mean the actual sales tax that we would receive from the sale of goods at those new businesses that are coming online this year.
Oh, I see.
Councilman Leesmeyer, if I could, I think I know your question. Those are not figured into the current projections for sales tax. We get current projections based on the total number and dollar value of the retailers in our city now, and those are projected for next year. So anyone we bring on is just like what you said, gravy, correct?
Correct.
Excellent. It's a glimmer of light.
So, with respect to a recession, it's not really completely and utterly accurate to say that if we hit a wall with growth and development, that things are going to come to a crash, because you're going to continue to have goods and services, you're going to continue to have property tax revenue from existing home sales, and to the extent that you, with the existing homes, not on sales, and to the extent that you do have activity in the city, you're still going to have building and permit fees to a point. And you've budgeted, your budget assumption for next year is a minus 5.4% in that category. When I look at the budget, I mean, you look at the public safety costs and others and the hit that it has on the general fund, I just want to remind all of us that, we're losing $4.2 million a year. $4.2 million a year, $50 per every resident in this city, based upon a decision that Governor Brown made in 2011. And this budget, Governor Brown and everybody up and down the state are touting putting $1.8 billion, sweeping $1.8 billion with a B, into a rainy day fund, but yet the governor cannot make whole the 4 cities in Riverside County by providing that dollar figure that every other city in the state of California gets. And I'm going to be on a conference call this Friday with Senator Morrell, his staff, another senator, their staffs, and a couple of assembly members to see how SB 25 can actually get out of the Appropriations Committee, get out of suspense, and actually get it to a floor vote, and let's see what the governor does. I'm not optimistic, but you know what? I'm going to continue to fight. Mr. Johnson?
Well, we appreciate that, Mayor and Council, because we obviously need not only the local stir from the grassroots again, but the connections that all of you have to make that happen. Just wanted to talk a little tiny bit real quick about that 5.4 reduction in building permits, and we don't believe that there's going to be a reduction in the number of permits and the activity in town. What happened last year is we overprojected. And so what Bruce has done is normalized that wave to the point where we feel very solid that we're going to meet those numbers.
Okay.
So even though it looks like we're going to do less than what we said we're going to do, that is based on an adjustment down that we made at mid-year. Just want to make sure that everybody's comfortable with that. So it will either be the same as what we actually have adjusted down to that we believe we're going to hit, or it will be over what we've adjusted down to.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Mr. August?
Yeah, a question to you, Mr. Mayor. Several council meetings ago, we had, the staff had brought up the possibility of a public safety CFD, and as I recall yourself, you were waiting for the outcome on SB 25, which sounds like you still are. Mr. Liesemeyer was going to look into some other options, regarding public safety and things like that. Do you foresee a time soon when perhaps we might need to bring up the public safety CFD again and perhaps some other alternatives to maybe cover the increasing public safety costs?
Yeah, I agree. Based upon the city manager's presentation before Mr. Foles took over, he's got those same concerns, and that's on his list. So I would just defer to staff's timing to bring it back. Because the budget adoption in Sacramento constitutionally happens on June 15th. And there's always backroom deals, always. And there's always optimism until the legislature adopts it, there's always hope. So, are there any other questions of staff from the budget workshop?
No.
I want to echo the sentiment from the city manager on behalf of all of us. I know that the staff, you have done some amazing things. You keep it going. I lived the expression, do more with less, at the federal level for almost 10 years, and it gets tired to hear. But our hats are off to each and every one of you for putting this together. And our hope is that we don't have to rely on Sacramento, but that we can grow ourselves out of this as we continue down our economic development path, both commercially and residentially, to the extent that it makes sense. And hopefully, someday in the future, we'll be able to have a seat at the table in terms of cost control for our public safety costs in this county. And I know that that is the fond hope of the other 17 contract cities in this county. So with that being said, if there are no other questions or comments, our budget workshop is concluded, and we are going to take a 10-minute break before we call to order the regular council meeting. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I call the regular meeting of the Menifee City Council to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes, sir. Councilmember August. Here. Councilmember Liesemeyer.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Denver. Here. Mayor Mann.
Here. We have words of inspiration tonight by Bishop John Raines of the LDS Stake and Mapleton congregation. Please join us.
Our Father in heaven, we come before thee at this time with gratitude for the opportunity we have to live in this wonderful community and this wonderful nation. We're grateful for those who serve us as our leaders and pray for their strength, their health, and their stamina and their responsibilities. May they be inspired to lead us and guide us according to thy will, and help us to develop a community of love and compassion, tolerance, and a place of unity where we can grow together as families and as individuals. We pray for strength for those who are serving our community in the military or armed forces, and we pray for those that are striving to build the community by establishing good businesses and honest and faithful industries. We pray for their strength and support. We also pray that you will watch over the Edgerton family and strengthen them in this their time of trial and need, and pray that as a community we'll do our part to build and strengthen one another and to see our city grow, become solvent, and become a wonderful place to live in and to grow throughout the years. And we pray for these things in the name of the Savior Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Bishop. Councilmember August, would you please lead us in the pledge?
Yes, please join me and the council in the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. Ready, begin.
If you'd please remain standing for a moment and honor the memory of Councilmember Wallace Edgerton in a moment of silence. Thank you very much. We will be adjourning the meeting this evening in honor of our colleague Wally Edgerton towards the end of the meeting. Thank you all very much. Council, would you please join us up front along with Director Robert Lennox? We have a presentation to make tonight.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This evening, it's my pleasure to acknowledge, along with Council, acknowledge the participation of some of Menifee's greatest assets. That would be the youth, of course. And today marks the end of the very first year, inaugural year of the Menifee Youth Advisory Committee. And let me tell you, this group of youth, I won't call them kids because they're actually young adults, are remarkable. They've done quite a bit to contribute to really the fiber of this community and helping it grow and helping the city grow. So I do want to highlight just a couple of things that they did this year so you can get a context of some of the individuals that have been really participating at the highest level. They did participate and volunteer for the Menifee Christmas Tree Lighting Festival, the Spring Fest event. They will be participating in the Independence Day celebration at the end of this month. They also helped establish the first Youth Advisory Committee logo, which we hope will be a lasting symbol of youth participation in the city. They participate in the Parks, Recreation Trails Open Space Master Plan by being part of the stakeholder interviews, as well as community workshops, giving vital input on what types of facilities and programs are important to the youth in this community. And then also we're participants in many of the tours that we held during various meetings through the year, visiting water reclamation plant, animal services, the sheriff's department, and really learning and understanding what government services do to make this city work. And so these youth represent essentially groups from all over the city. Their representation is from Paloma High School, Heritage High School, Mount San Jacinto Community College, Santa Rosa Academy, and then I'll just jump in to bring them up so you can see for yourself. They have very busy schedules, so we got as many of them here tonight as we could, and hopefully we can show them some appreciation for what they've done. So. I can have Angelica Austin come up. Next, Teresa Austin. Abigail who's? Zonke Frazier. Carla Monroy. River Michael Ricardo. And I think we had a couple latecomers. Tabitha, if you want to come through. Tabitha Toussaint. And I think there's one more. Michaela Whitener. Thank you. Before we do the photo op, I also want to invite up just briefly a representation from Arts Council Menifee. In addition to the list of accomplishments that this group provided this year, they also participated heavily in some of the services that Arts Council provides.
Thank you, Robert. Before I start, I want to say, first of all, whoever's idea it was to form a youth advisory committee, great job. That was brilliant. These guys have been excellent. Arts Council Menifee has a trustee. Her name's Betty Spadafora, and unfortunately, she has a family event tonight, so she asked me to come and speak as her proxy and share this message of appreciation for our Youth Advisory Committee. I personally had the privilege of serving on the selection committee. I don't know if you guys remember that day, but I just want to say you haven't let us down. You guys have been wonderful this whole year. On behalf of Arts Council Menifee, I want to thank you for your commitment to the events that we put on and the things that you guys have done to make our events like our art showcase and our gallery receptions, as well as our Summer Youth Art Institute. You guys have been there. I'm very thankful to have Angelica and Teresa Austin. You guys are just our MVP, so thank you all so much.
Like we're going to squeeze in, and while we're doing that, I do want to also highlight there are more members. Of course, they have very busy schedules, so these are the ones that could certainly be here tonight, and we really appreciate everything they've contributed this year. It's been a great year, and we're looking forward to a big group next year. About the selection process, we will be starting recruitment immediately with applications for the next class due August 21st, and so there'll be a lot of publicity about that as well. And this group went through a pretty intense selection process, as Bill was mentioning, which did include panels, I think 3 panels, if I'm not mistaken, and some mock planning for city services, and so this is the best and brightest. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for all of your efforts. Congratulations. Future leaders.
Somebody's always late.
Okay, turn around one more. Smile big. Disneyland. Okay. Thank you.
And committee members, before you leave, there are some nice swag bags from the city. Please get one on your way out.
We'll take them all. Thank you, Mr. Lennox. Thank you, Youth Advisory Committee. Thank you. You're the inaugural Youth Advisory Committee, which we like to call the YAC. And we appreciate your efforts, future leaders of not only Menifee but elsewhere. Thank you all very much. Look forward to the next round of volunteers. Before we go on to anything else, I just want to share with the public that the Edgerton family is still in the process of making arrangements for a public service, and that will be announced in the coming days. We don't have any information on that, but as soon as we do, we'll let everybody know. Armed with that information, on to approval of the meeting minutes from May 20th. Are there any modifications to the minutes of the May 20 meeting? Hearing none, those minutes are approved. Madam Clerk, are there any modifications to the agenda tonight?
No, sir, as posted.
Thank you. Before we take public comment, I would like to recognize there's several elected officials in the audience tonight, and I would like to briefly recognize them. I'd like to recognize Trustee Bill Zimmerman from the Mount San Jacinto College District. I'd like to recognize Trustee Ron Ulibarri from the Menifee School District, as well as Bob O'Donnell from the Menifee School District, Rick Hoffman from the Lake Hemet Water Board. Rick, good evening. Also, Director Ron Sullivan from the Eastern Municipal Water District, and also retired Menifee trustee from the school board, Ms. Phoebe Irie. Thank you all for coming. And so for public comment tonight, Madam Clerk, if you would call the first public commenter.
Yes, sir. Katie Manier.
Good evening. I guess I have a question tonight about who ordered the flags to be flown at half-mast. There was an article in the paper stating that Scott Mann authorized that to be done. I'm just going to state, Scott Mann, you have no authority to do that. Where was our city manager that he didn't catch that? And then the blame is passed off to just a worker that puts the flags up and down. That was not appropriate. Our flag does not go at half-mast other than authorization from the governor of the state or the president of the United States. And you don't qualify for any of those. Next on my little rant, it's nice to hear you make decisions about finances when we all know you've committed mortgage fraud, can't handle your own finances, and you're going to run a city. I don't find it funny. I think it's embarrassing. I think it's embarrassing beyond belief. I think anybody that can't handle their own finances any better than that should not be involved in a city handling those finances.
So I take full responsibility, ladies and gentlemen, for the national ensign being at half-staff for about 4 hours in a day. I did order the city flag to be flown at half-staff until we memorialize our colleague Wally Edgerton. I'll do it again. I'll do it every day, twice on Sundays. And for the speaker to come and complain about that, I think that's pretty small, especially on a solemn occasion. And I just want to let you all know that.
It was the United States flag, and I have
Next
pictures
speaker,
of it,
please.
so you're lying.
I'm not lying. I understand completely that the president and the governor are the only ones that can authorize it to be flown at half-staff. You're out of order.
Of it.
Next speaker, please.
Glenn Bod.
That's tough to follow. My name is Glenn Baud, Mayor, Member Council, thank you. I'd like to first offer my condolences to the Edgerton family and friends and to the residents of Menifee. I think the residents have a severe loss here too, besides his relatives, because the few minutes I've spent with him, he was a great man and cared about Menifee. I'm here representing Sina Cho, who's in the audience tonight. Sina, could you stand up? And she's with her son Sebastian. She owns properties at 3391 Sweetwater and 26762 Keller Road in Menifee. This has been going on for a couple of years now. She is a victim of the transfer of authority from the county to the city. She started building these two properties as an investment for her children under the county, pulled permits, started the process, started the building. Then the bottom fell out of the housing market. She had to stop for a while, get refinancing, and then start up and build again. Went to the county. County said, nope, you're in the city now, you gotta go to the city. She went to the city said, you gotta start over. New permits, new everything, start over. She said, I can't afford to do that, and disappeared. So later on, she started getting notices and citations for not having building permits. So she came to the city, tried to get resolution, asked for a meeting for 6 months, finally got a meeting with the city attorney and some other representatives, and they said, no, you gotta go back and start over again, all right? So after that, she tried to appeal. We sent a notice, and a couple of council members got involved in the conversation. I think Councilmember August, you were involved in it, about her wanting to appeal, and the city was referred by the city manager, city attorney. City attorney says you can't appeal. You haven't pulled permits yet. You got to pay for the permits. There got to be a decision where you can appeal. So after that, she decided, scraped together some money and pulled permits. All right. After she pulled permits, she tried to appeal, and they said, well, in order for you to appeal, and this is, Mrs. Bennett gave me this information, so if I'm wrong, correct me. You have to appeal to the Planning Commission, and you have to pay $5,700 to appeal to Planning Commission. Then if you want to appeal the Planning Commission decision, you got to pay $3,500 to go to the council. Then if you go to the council or the Planning Commission and you win, you don't get the money back. So she decided the best way to go was to use that money for the construction of the building. City building official agreed, said, you shouldn't be paying fines and penalties, we should be using that. And she had $20,000 worth of penalties already, waiting for an opinion from the city attorney. She was being cited $2,000 every day. So when we got the opinion, she pulled permits, discussed it with the chief building official. We reached an agreement on how to go through this process, which was the less invasive way to do the inspection and correct the violations. She called for inspections. They cut a hole in the wall. They looked at it, said, fine, fine, fine. A week later, she got a letter from the senior building official saying that he wants all the exterior of the building torn off, all the interior buildings torn off, basically demoing the buildings. I have some pictures here, if you could pass them down to the buildings. They're very nice buildings.
Mr. Bod, that's your time.
If you would, Mr. Brady, make sure that the city clerk gets those pictures and gets distributed to the appropriate staff. And Mr. Johnson, if you could work with the speaker and I know we've done it before, just try to have another meeting with them and see where we can go, see if there's a path
Could I-
of
could I
compliance.
ask-
See if there's a path to compliance going forward. Next speaker, please, Madam Clerk.
Dario Rodriguez.
Good evening. Thank
Good
you for
evening.
your time. My name is Dario Rodriguez, and I'm here on behalf of Steve Harriman and the SoCal State Amateur Boxing Tournament. I'm the event coordinator for that event. It's being held in Menifee this weekend, Friday from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m., Saturday from noon to 5, and Sunday from noon to 5. And I just wanted to formally invite the city and the city council to attend this event. A little about our event: it's a sanctioned USA Boxing State Amateur Championship Tournament. USA Boxing is the governing body of the United States Olympic boxing team. So you could possibly be watching the next future Olympians. Over 360 licensed amateur boys and girls from ages 8 to adult will compete. They will be coming from all over California, Nevada, and Arizona to compete for championship belts. We've averaged an attendance of over 1,000 people per day in the past, and with this year doubling our bouts, we are anticipating over 3,000 people to eat, sleep, and shop in Menifee this weekend. I'd also like the opportunity in the future to meet with Parks and Recreation to consider this tournament, to consider making this tournament a city-sponsored event, as this is one of the premier sporting events for the city of Menifee. We will also be having plenty of former championship boxers. Fernando Vargas will be in attendance. He's coming in from Las Vegas, bringing 14 kids in. And he's bringing former champion Joel Casamayor, former heavyweights Dee Collier, Michael Weaver, and Andy the Dakota Kid Hellman will also be in attendance. So a lot of big names, a lot of people coming to our city. And, you know, in my opinion, if I feel, you know, this event brings a lot of business to the city of Menifee, and I would very much like the opportunity to work with the city to see if we could get this sponsored as a city event in the future. And also, I just have one of the belts that we will be presenting to the kids. And as you guys can see, we clearly put Menifee's main event. If you guys see the billboards, posters everywhere, I mean, we're proud of our city. I graduated from Paloma Valley High School. You know, I live in the city. I own a home in the city. I love Menifee, and I'm proud of this event, and I fully support it. And I hope you and everyone else will support it as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Mr. Rodriguez. Would it be possible, Mr. Johnson, would it be possible, Mr. Lennox, if you could have the Parks, Recs, and Trails Commission reach out to the organization for the future, I think this is the fourth year?
This is the fourth year.
This is the fourth year in a row, and at least explore with the Parks Commission the opportunity to partner and maybe add this to, potentially add this as a signature event down the
Yes,
road.
definitely. Thank you.
Thank you very much for
Thank
bringing
you,
that to our
guys.
attention.
And if you guys want to come by, I'll be there every single minute, working overtime and all that
Okay.
good stuff.
Thanks.
But yeah.
I get enough sparring here, thank you. On to council member reports, and do we have any other speakers? I'm sorry.
No, sir, your next speaker is at the beginning of your consent item. Yes,
Okay,
sir.
thank you, Madam Clerk. Council member reports on committee activities. Anything from the COG or RTA or Mr. Denver?
WR met, I think what I'll do is just say that it was down in the weeds, and maybe I won't go through it all. Pay raise for the CEO and evaluation of what we're doing, and the HERO program is going to become the largest HERO program in the country, and on and on. So when there's a specific thing that is useful for you to know, I'll be glad to bring it back.
Thank you, Mr. Denver. Anyone else? I have nothing to report as well. On to the consent calendar. Madam, is there any items that need to be pulled? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, would you call the speaker on the consent calendar, please?
Yes, sir. Christy Hennessy.
This is on 10.5.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the council. I'm here tonight to speak on item 10.5 from the consent calendar, ordinance number 1205-170. I'm requesting that the council will remove this item and postpone it from the agenda. It's our view that the fee is outside of the law and that it requires voter approval before it's being implemented. We don't believe that the fee that's being considered here, the public educational government access fee, meets the narrow exception of the law, and we don't believe that it's upon the franchise holder to incur that fee. So what we've done is we've submitted our comments, our outside counsel, to city staff and asked them to consider our comments, and we think there's a very simple solution, which is to take it to the vote of the citizens. And with that, I would welcome any questions and appreciate the consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Hennessy. City Attorney, is there any comment that you can provide? I mean, we had a rather substantial staff report from you on this, and I didn't hear anything about requirement to take this to a vote.
I'll just say this, Mayor. There are cities up and down the state that have PEG ordinances in place, and representatives from Time Warner Cable have gone to a couple of jurisdictions. I know, for example, that they're raising these exact same concerns with the County of Santa Cruz's PEG ordinance at this point in time. We've looked at the issue. We've actually prepared memoranda and correspondence for other jurisdictions explaining why we don't agree with that position as a point of law. And frankly, there's really no precedent or case out there that supports the argument that is being advanced to you tonight.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Hennessy.
Thank you.
Are there any other speakers on the consent calendar?
No, sir.
Move approval.
We have a motion by Councilman and a second by Mr. Denver. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember August. Councilmember Leesmeyer.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Denver. And Mayor Mann.
Aye.
Thank you.
We have no public hearings tonight. We're on to agenda item 12.1, discussion item. Consider options for filling council member vacancy. Now, I'm going to exercise some discretion at by the chair, and I'm going to ask that it's not a public hearing, but I'm going to treat it similarly to a public hearing in that we're going to take a staff report first, then we're going to have questions from council to staff, and then we'll take public comment, and then we'll bring it inside the rail and debate and decide. So with that being said, we'll take the staff report now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this staff report falls to me. Obviously, with the very sad passing of Councilman Edgerton, from a purely mechanical standpoint, what we have now is a vacancy on the City Council. And the government code has very specific provisions which speak to the options that are available to a City Council when this happens. And most important to us is that within 60 days of the creation of the vacancy, which in this case was on May 26th, the council must, per statute, do one of the two following things. Either A, by a majority vote of the City Council, appoint a new council person, in which case the City Council can select whatever process that it feels is appropriate to arrive at that moment of appointment. So long as it happens within that 60-day window. Or second, it can call a special election. And in this circumstance, the next election on the regular election calendar schedule is on November 3rd of this year. So in order to call an election that would be timely prior to November 3rd, the council needs to take action on this item before July 10th. On an appointment, however, an appointment could occur as late as July 24th, As you well know, the council has recently adopted a policy of being dark in July, and as a practical matter, the last regularly scheduled meeting of the city council prior to either July 10th or July 24th would be the next regularly scheduled meeting, which is on June 17th. So I hope I haven't muddled that too much. The short of it is that before the council tonight is a decision whether to proceed by way of election or by way of appointment. And once you've chosen that path, implementation of that path, if it is to happen at a regularly scheduled meeting, would have to happen on June 23rd. Sorry, June 17th.
Mr. August?
A couple of questions for Mr. Melchin. November the 3rd, should the council decide to go with an election, what would be the soonest time that the person elected would take the seat?
They would take the seat, Councilman August, at the first meeting in December.
Sometime early December?
Yes.
Okay. Now, next question. What, there was also another option, and I guess it doesn't really apply here, should the council decide to, what are the procedures or laws or ordinances that should the council decide to leave the seat vacant? How does that work?
There is not a process under the government code that allows for leaving the seat vacant. The law is, and I'll just quickly, just because it's right in front of me, if a vacancy occurs in an elective office provided by this chapter, which it has in this circumstance, the city council shall, within 60 days from the commencement of the vacancy, either fill the vacancy by appointment or call a special election to fill the vacancy. There is no option in the law to leave the vacancy.
Okay, last question. Is there any option or provision in the law that basically says, should you hold an election on November the 3rd, is there, and I already know the answer to this, but maybe somebody in the audience would, is there any provision in the law that would allow that person to take office for the remaining term on Mr. Edgerton's and then follow into the next term?
No. In point of fact, that same statute speaks directly to this. The last sentence of the provision that I just read to you. A person appointed or elected to fill a vacancy holds the office for the unexpired term of the former incumbent.
Okay. Can the council elect someone to fill out Mr. Edgerton's term tonight as an appointment?
The answer to that would be no, it's not properly agendized. So the soonest you could take that action would be either at a special meeting between now and June 17th or at the regular meeting of June 17th.
So if I were to come forward with a motion tonight to nominate somebody for the council to appoint, how would I do that?
It's certainly within your prerogative tonight to make a suggestion for utilization of an appointment process. It's even within your prerogative tonight to suggest who that person might be, but you are not in a position tonight, based on the agenda before you, to actually make that appointment.
So,
You need to
in other
agendize
words,
that.
how would I phrase that?
Your motion would be to proceed by an appointment process, to indicate who your proposed appointee would be, and to request that the council agendize that matter for the next regularly scheduled meeting.
Just be there when I need you, okay?
Okay.
However, is it not correct that the agenda's been posted, we're in meeting with a could you dial me back on the, with 4 votes, we could add an agenda item, could we not, while we're in the meeting? Technically, we could.
You could, although typically you need to have a basis,
An urgency basis.
An urgency basis to do that. And so I can't prejudge the articulation of what that urgency basis would be. But yes, technically you can get there.
Well, an urgency basis would be theoretically, we're up against the 60-day window, as one example. We're not there yet, right?
That's correct.
We've got at least one more regular meeting. We could call a special meeting at any time. I, for one, would not want to breach the municipal code that we just adopted by having meetings in July, would be my preference. I don't know how the others would feel, but it seems to me that we do have opportunities to hear Mr. August's points at some point, and maybe he can share portions of them tonight, and then if we can't act on them, depending upon how the rest of the agenda item goes, we can have another discussion in another meeting?
There's nothing that you said that I disagree with.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Clear as mud. Are there any other questions for the staff? I do have one for the city clerk or the city attorney, because I'm still a little fuzzy on the definition truly of what a special election actually is, and how, we've heard the term special election. What does that really mean to us right now in 2015 compared to the regularly scheduled election cycles?
Your general municipal election that was set by your council on inauguration of this city is in fact the even-numbered years coinciding with the presidential election. So any election you choose to go to, although it's on the books as an election and has to be in order to be chosen by you, it would be special to you. So it would be a special election for this city to go to any election outside of November 2016 for this purpose.
Thank you for that. Can we theoretically call an election, a special election under that definition, outside of the scope of the registrar of voters timeline in the county? In other words, I know there's a requirement for us, if the council were to ask for an election, there's a 114-day noticing requirement to the public, correct?
Yes, and that takes you right at the beginning of nomination period.
So it would be kind of silly to, if we were to go to an election, to do it outside of any other election cycle than this upcoming November, if that's what the desire of the council is.
The next option you would have is any election on the books. You cannot choose to just
Which would be
choose a
March
date.
of 2016, right?
Yes, sir.
And so,
Bree, mhm.
so March, June, I think there's a mail-in ballot in August, and then there's a, is that right? Is that how it goes?
You're hitting the main dates.
Okay.
Those are the ones scheduled in the code that we're allowed to choose from.
All right, Mr. August?
Just to add on to what the mayor was saying, again to Mr. Melching, so that the council can also not vote tonight to opt for a special election.
That's correct. The council doesn't have to vote tonight to opt for a special election or for an appointment, but what the council must do is within 60 days, it must either make one of those two selections.
Do you have an idea what the cost of a election for District 3 would be?
I apologize. That was a note that I had in giving my staff report, and I heard that it was $25,000. I mean, that's from the staff report.
Any other questions of council to staff at this juncture? No. Okay, then we'll proceed with comments from the public on this item. And I would ask the public, the speakers that are coming up, if you would, you're not required under the law to do so, but we would really, really like to know when you come to the podium whether or not you'll actually live in District 3. Now, you don't have to, but it would help us really make a decision here tonight. So that's our request. If you would please let us know whether or not you live in District 3, and we can figure out the rest. Madam Clerk, call the first speaker, please.
Linda Kowalas.
Maybe someone can help me with that. I haven't lived here very long. I don't know what district I'm in. So how would be the best way to figure that out?
What part of the city do you live in generally?
Live in Heritage Lake.
You're in District 4.
Okay, cool. May I make a comment anyway?
Of course, yeah. We just wanted to clarify. We just wanted kind of an idea of
Okay.
what the sense of the district is of the speakers tonight, that's all.
I appreciate that. Okay, thank you, Mayor Mann and council members. My husband and I moved here about 1.5 years ago to prepare for retirement. We lived in another city for 30 years. Most of those years were great. We raised our 3 sons there with great friends and a safe environment. Over the last several years, it has become a scary place, and we searched for over a year to find a safe, beautiful place to retire and enjoy our golden years. We found that here in Menifee. We left a city filled with city government corruption, and I'm sure you can guess who I'm talking about, which of course allowed the city to become very unsafe and run down. We do not want that to happen here. We have spent a good amount of money making a comfortable life for ourselves and our family as they visit. We want our Menifee to stay a safe, secure, and beautiful place for families and older folks like us to enjoy retirement. I think all Menifee families want what we want. With that in mind, I ask for us and for all of our Menifee families that you be very careful on who you appoint to replace Councilman Edgerton, if you decide to appoint. We send our deepest regards to Councilman Edgerton's family for comfort, peace, and we offer our gratefulness for their service to our community. Now, Mayor and council members, you have a very important decision to make. Please ponder it and realize the responsibility you have to replace him with an honest, energetic, sincere, and hardworking citizen who really does care about our city. One who really wants a great city for all of us and knows how to accomplish that task. One who has proven their loyalty and their eagerness to serve. So please don't take this appointment lightly. It can affect our city in years to come, as I discovered where we lived before. Please consider your choice with great thought and even prayer. It is that important. Thank you for listening. Your citizens appreciate your hard work and your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Quall. Are you in favor of an appointment or an election, or are you neutral?
I think at this point, after hearing that it costs $25,000, I think that an appointment would be, I'd be happy with an appointment.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Julia Dove.
Good evening. My name's Julia Dove. I live in Heritage Lake, so District 4. I've lived there for about 8 years with my husband, and we have a daughter there. We own a local business here in Menifee, and we love Menifee. We're proud to call it home. My husband and I try to keep up on local politics and all the issues, and so tonight there's just one issue I wanted to address, which is, of course, the issue at hand, whether to appoint or do an election. With the vacant city council position open, and to my understanding, prior to Councilman Edgerton's passing, he left 3 names of individuals he recommended to fill his position. I want to state my support for an appointment with one of those 3 names. One reason that I would suggest that and support that is the cost. As the last speaker said, $25,000 isn't a small amount, and so it seems better to spend that money elsewhere. The second reason is that when the voters elected Councilman Edgerton, they were also voting him his opinions and his recommendations. So with that being said, it almost seems redundant to have an election. If we trusted him with his choices and his opinions, we should trust him with the 3 names that he's also left and support that. So again, I earnestly believe it's in the city's best interest, especially the interests of all of the individuals that live here and the residents, to support Councilman Edgerton's decision. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dove. Next speaker, please.
Linda Blanche.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council, and city staff. Again, I live in District 4. Is it 1? Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. I don't live in your district. I live in Craig's district. Do I know where I live?
No, I know where your church is.
Oh, thanks.
I don't know where you live.
Okay, now wait a minute. Don't use up my 3 minutes.
Okay.
I'm here this evening to in support of one of those members that Councilman Edgerton left, and one of the names, Lisa Sobek. Lisa, I have known her for 3 years. I've worked with her on many committees. How I got to know her was with the Menifee Interfaith Council. And this woman is one tireless worker. She, in 1997, started a GREAT program. It's called GREAT program at Cali Kilpatrick School. If anyone doesn't know what GREAT is, it's Grandparents Reading, Enriching, and Tutoring Literacy Program. A year later, she started the same program over at Chester Morrison School. She has been president of PTA. She is very active in this community. And as you know, she is a member on the Planning Commission. She's lived here for, it'll be 26 years in August. This city is her heart. She also implemented the Military Banner Program. I can't think of a better person to fulfill Councilman Edgerton's position than Lisa Sobek. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Marnie Palmerin.
Well, first of all, good evening. I'm glad to see you all of you. It was quite a trip to get here. I came from Paris, and I think I should get a reward. I came on the 2:15.
It's just beginning.
Well, I always come by the ostrich farm, and I didn't. Bad choice. Yes, okay. Okay. My thing here is that after I'm around town a lot and people ask me questions, I have more answers to more questions that you never thought of talking about. After giving thought and hearing the different coffee clutches at McDonald's and Coco's and the gentleman talking, this is what came out from all of them. And after giving thought to the choice of a special election vs. direct appointment in filling the currently open city council seat, it seems like a special election is the best, even at the cost. The advantages of the special election are the city will be less diverse. We see what happens every time there is something that the council tries to do. It avoids the appearance of favoritism, accusations of cronyism, undercuts the arguments that the opponents will make that a council appointee will be chosen on the basis of who will support the opinions of the existing council members breathe, rather than the direct constituents in that area. It avoids giving the appointee the unfair advantage of unelected incumbency when they're competing with other candidates in the subsequent election. People generally value what they work hard for. As you all know through your elections, you know, you really worked hard, you put out your effort, and you rewarded that by the people electing to you. Sometimes when you hand people things, it does not mean the same to them. Finally, an election is truly the democratic way, and the cost of democracy is very high. One of our veterans, 18 years worth, said to me, it doesn't matter what it costs. Think of the cost of lives to maintain democracy. He also said, the cost of running our country, we pay that. And he said, quite frankly, the cost of democracy, so these people get an elected from the entire city of what supports their district the best. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Joan Barrett.
Well, I'm ashamed to admit I don't know what district I'm in, but I live in the core, so.
That'd be District 1.
Number 1. Great. As a citizen of the city of Menifee, I wish to extend my condolences to the family of Wally Edgerton and the city council. As a much admired and personal friend of mine, he will be missed. I understand that Mr. Edgerton wrote a letter with a recommendation as to his successors with 3 specific names mentioned. An appointment of one of these 3 would facilitate filling the offices left vacant. While the election could be held to replace him, it would be an unnecessary expense. Funds might be used for special election, could be used for some of the many needs of the city. As a concerned citizen, it is my hope and request that the wishes of Mr. Edgerton be seriously considered.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker, please.
Al Powers.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Councilman. I live in Greg August district, so I know who my councilman is. I agree with some of the other speakers here. Mr. Edgerton left 3 names that he trusted. I believe that you should consider his request, save the $25,000, appoint a person. If that person decides later on that they want to run again, let them do it at their expense. I don't think the city should pay for a special election. Appoint somebody, and I think you should use that list that the councilman asked. I think he had some good recommendations, so I hope that you consider that. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Next speaker, please.
Chuck Reuter.
Good evening, Mayor Mann, almost said Denver, City Council, staff, and fellow citizens. Can you hear me? You know, the most important thing I think a city council needs to do is to look out for the entire city of Menifee. And that seems to be a problem all over the country. You get people into positions of power, into positions of authority, and when they come on, they say, oh yeah, we're gonna take care of you guys. And then as time goes on, they get smaller and smaller, and that's why you have a lot of corruption. And that's why you have a lot of unhappy people. The American people today are very angry. They don't quite know what to do with their anger. But we are a nation of, for, and by the people. That requires an election and I would prefer a special election. I don't live in District 3, but I would, because what we're doing here is setting a precedent. I know what happened last time I was here. But when you are elected, you are empowered. You're empowered by the people who put you in there. If you are appointed, you are beholden to the people who appointed you. It's just natural. There's no way around that. That's the reason why I urge you to have a special election. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reuter. Next speaker.
Randy Williams.
Let voters decide. What's wrong with that? My response is they already have. 3 years ago, voters elected Wally to represent them, and he served until his last breath. Unlike Fred Twyman, he had time to provide a plan on the best way to fulfill that term should he be unable. Opponents believe his plan should be discounted because it was an email, not notarized or disseminated correctly. But no one is disputing Wally was the author. He is the current elected representative, and he made his dying wish clear as if he was in that empty seat tonight. On behalf of the 3rd District, please consider an appointment. Like a baseball player that slides into third base safely but breaks his leg, he's asking for a pinch runner to reach home for his constituents. Opponents, however, believe he should be called out and deny him the opportunity. There is no place for pinch runners, even one inning. Let's hold a new draft. Pinch runners are short-term and can serve a public benefit, and whether the council, elected representatives, or voters make the call, they all are worthy. A new election, however, may show less respect for the voters of the last one and the officials elected to represent them. Therefore, your vote and expectation is shortchanged with less years. By rejecting the appointment recommended by the voters' last choice implies the vision of that electorate through their chosen representative should cease, despite alternatives for it to continue. No two elections are alike, and whether it is the same voters or not, a new election may devalue in some ways the last one. Opponents of appointment claim that an election is cost-effective and just too important to hold off until the next year's election. They claim the reasons are noble. That may be. I make no claims to perfect knowledge of one's heart or mind. If they are noble, I assume the same opposition would take place with a different official, even if it's ones you favor. They would be denied, them and their families, political alliances notwithstanding. And should opponents have a dying wish for their constituents, they would welcome similar treatment. And if it was an election held, I would applaud those that will not endorse, raise funds, advise, or support any candidate when they claim that it was never about trying to influence the election for political gain and it was solely based on a democratic principle. I commend officials who govern on principles, less so by those who govern by manipulation. There's always safety and political safety in a public vote, and when voters who have already spoken and those elected to represent them are honored, respected, and uncompromised, a public good is served as well. And by no means is nothing wrong with that for this community. I do not live in the 3rd District.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Thank you also, I didn't see you out in the foyer. Thank you for your service as a trustee of the Paris High School District in the past. Thank you, sir. Next speaker, please.
Rick Croy.
Evening, Council. I'm speaking, I live in the 3rd District, and I'm speaking as a private citizen. Although credible arguments can be made for either holding an election or filling the vacancy with an appointment, I believe in this case an appointment is a clear choice. Not only is it the fiscally prudent choice for Menifee, it is also respectful of Mr. Edgerton's wishes. Knowing Wally's commitment to the 3rd District, for me to be included on Wally's shortlist excuse me, an incredible honor. Sorry, I need your sunglasses. Excuse me. I'll try to get through it. Scott, when you appointed Lisa Sobek to the Planning Commission, you did so for all the right reasons. Here's a person who served her community with the energy of a teenager and the wisdom of her faith. We have watched Lisa grow in her role on the commission, making many difficult but balanced arguments that have always been based on her diligent research. As Mr. Denver said a while ago, what a novel idea, a planning commissioner who actually goes and looks at a project site. I commend Lisa for that. As unfortunate as these circumstances are in losing Wally, we're truly blessed in this community to have such wonderful people ready to serve. I'm sure Lisa would serve the remainder of Wally's term with all those same qualities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Croy. Next speaker, please.
Gloria Sanchez.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I'm here on behalf of Chris Thomas, who asked me to read a letter from him to you. Chris lives in the 3rd District. Menifee City Council, I am unable to attend the City Council meeting tonight as my wife and I are in Utah delivering my daughter to the Missionary Training Center in Utah to serve an 18-month mission in Russia. Regarding the City Council seat to be filled due to the passing of my friend, mentor, and city servant, Wally Edgerton, I would encourage the Council to use the appointment process and consider Lisa Sobek as the appointee following and respecting the wishes of Councilman Wally Edgerton. As is common knowledge, at this point, Wally sent a letter to the Council and staff expressing his wishes that either myself, Chris Thomas, Lisa Sobek, or Rick Croy be appointed to the 3rd District Council seat upon his death. Wally earned the right to make that suggestion by being elected to City Council and every election since the inception of the city, being elected mayor and enjoying overwhelmingly the support in each election due to his service and representation of his constituents, issues, and concerns. I have chosen to withdraw my name as an option due to my existing work and personal commitments that would not allow me to devote the time necessary to properly serve on the City Council. I can and desire to remain serving on the Planning Commission and enjoy such service. Lisa Sobek has the time to devote, as well as she will represent the same issues and concerns in a manner consistent with the values of the constituents of the 3rd District. The City Council's decision to do anything less than the appointment process will indicate a less than genuine motivation by the Council. The option of the election process, while available, is too costly for the city, even at $25,000, and will waste even more valuable and much-needed city staff time. Additionally, the voters of the 3rd District have already spoken and expressed what values and policies the majority of the district desire by electing Wally Edgerton and desired his values and decisions. Lisa Sobeck is the right and proper replacement. Do what is right and let the consequences follow. Sincerely, Chris Thomas.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Bill Zimmerman.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Bill Zimmerman, I'm a 25-year resident in Menifee. I live in District 3. I think a lot of you know that I ran in the 2012 election. There's a lot of folks who are saying that the people in District 3 all believe that Wallace Edgerton's ideas were aligned with theirs, but I'll remind that it was a very close race. In fact, 47% of the people voted for me. With that, I want to say that I respect the will of the people. I respect what the voters have said, and I hope that you will give the voters in District 3 the same respect and the opportunity that they deserve to voice their opinion and put it to an election. It doesn't mean that the people that Mr. Edgerton had hoped would be appointed can't run, and in fact, if they're the best people, then the voters will see that and they'll elect them as well. Please, I'm asking you, give the voters the opportunity to weigh in and speak and give their opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zimmerman. Next speaker, please.
Nadine Matthews.
Good evening. I'm in District, what was it? 3? Oh, and over here in Palmilla and
Yeah, District 3.
3, okay. Okay, I came here today to offer my sincerest condolences to Judy Edgerton and her family at this difficult time, as they as a family, you as a board, and we as a community all mourn the loss of Wally Edgerton. I also want to express my deepest gratitude for all the years Wally served on this board to help make Menifee the wonderful city that we all enjoy today. As a city moving forward, after losing such a wonderful civic leader, it is my hope that his wishes for an appointee for this board as his replacement be selected from the 3 names he endorsed prior to his passing will be respectfully considered at this time. And I would also like to add, my vote would be to appoint Lisa Sobeck. I also want to thank each one of you for the considerable amount of work and time you put into your civic leadership roles, and thank you for your service.
Thank you very much, Ms. Matthews. Next speaker, please.
Angela Wojciechowski.
Hi, good evening, Mayor Mann and the council members. I'm here, I do not live in District 3, I live in District 2, but I'd like to support Wally's decision. I think I was here at a city council meeting one night and I heard him on the phone on hospice, you know, participating in city matters, and that just really impressed me. I think this is a man that had a heart for the city, that really cared for the city, and I think he put a lot of thought in the 3 people that he appointed to follow in his steps. So I would encourage you to do that, to appoint somebody rather than spend the money on a vote. I also want to thank you for flying the flag half-mast and honoring him. And I think this would be an honor to him too, to pick one of the 3 that he appointed or would like to see appointed and have you consider. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Sue Christensen.
Good evening. I am having staff hand out the full context of my comments because they far exceed, I don't know if they far exceed, but they exceed the 3 minutes. So I'm going to do the condensed version for you here. Good evening, council members, city staff, fellow residents. My name is Sue Christensen, and I am a former city council member the founder and board chair of the Boys and Girls Club of Menifee, the current past president of the Central County United Way, and a 13-year resident of Menifee. Since the end of my term, let me back up. I am the only person in this city, the only individual who has the unique experience of having been appointed to this specific city council. So I do not live in District 3, but I'm here to tell you of that experience and voice my opinion on what direction I think you should take. The choice is yours, you have that. But here's my story, so to speak. Since the end of my term serving in Menifee in 2012, I have, for the most part, opted to remain in the background, happy to serve my city in other ways on the numerous boards that I serve, honoring the residents' voting decision and supporting council actions and decisions from behind the scenes. I do feel compelled tonight and obligated to come and voice my opinion because of my unique situation. And I hope that you will take that into account. You have an option to appoint or hold a special election to fill the vacancy left by the untimely and unfortunate death of Councilmember Edgerton. Wally served this city with distinction for 8 years, 6 years, 6.5 years. He was an inaugural city council member. I'm going to go off script now. I'm sorry. I was going to read this, but I'm not going to. He deserves to be honored. He absolutely does. But our country is not founded on allowing people to select their successors. Our country is founded on a republic, and that is allowing the people in the community to select themselves through a vote who they want to represent them. There are many ways that we can honor Wally, and we will. There's no question, and rightfully so. But the people of District 3 deserve to have that choice. The 3 people that Wally has selected in his choice, and I understand that's going to be a topic for discussion later. I know each of them to some varying degrees, not very well, but I do. And I personally think that each of them has something to offer up to this council. I don't believe that any one of them should be appointed. I think that if they want this position and they have that fire in the belly to serve this city, they'll get in the election and they'll do what they have to do. And if the voters elect them, then all the power to them, and I support them 100%, as I do everyone here who the voters have selected. A little bit about my appointment. All I ever wanted to do was serve. I love serving communities. I love filling the void. I love doing the right thing. I love putting in place programs and processes that help people and make their lives easier. And I'm at 3 minutes. Anyway, it was not all, I'm going to take a couple extra seconds. As the unique member, I apologize. Tell me to sit down if you feel the need. I'm wrapping it up. I know. I came in here and it was not what it was supposed to be. Somebody commented on Lisa Sobeck, and I think she's a wonderful woman, and how she will do the right thing and does her homework. That's exactly what I did, and I was reminded on an ongoing basis that I was a lesser council member, regardless of how I operated, because I was appointed and not elected. Don't do that to another person.
Thank you,
The
Ms.
cost is not worth it, period.
Thank you for your service on the council, and thank you for your comment. Next speaker, please.
George Rexstraw.
Good evening, Mayor.
Evening.
Council, staff. I've listened to the comments very carefully here this evening, and I'd like to know if freedom and democracy is for sale just to save $25,000. I don't think that's an argument. I think the people in the district needs to have an election. And the reason I say that is because the person would be equal amongst his peers. All 4 of you have stood election. I don't think that there should be, somebody should get a free ride for a year or whatever it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rackstraw. Next speaker, next city clerk, acting city clerk. Next speaker, please.
Bob O'Donnell.
Can't wait for your new district office to be built there, Mr. O'Donnell.
Yeah, you'll have some extra parking, huh?
Yeah.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. The reason I came tonight, I'm Bob O'Donnell. I've been involved in the community for over 42 years, and I don't live in District 3, I live in District 2. And I thought about this long and hard because I know this is going to be a difficult decision for the City Council. But I believe that one thing that hasn't been spoke tonight is that if you go with an election, you're going to go all the way to December before you have the seat filled. And you could have many split votes. Because as you realize, you only have 4 members. So as you work on some intense items that you definitely work on, you could end up having a lot of neutral votes that not getting things accomplished. So that is one reason I believe that you should go with an appointment. I do believe that $25,000 isn't a lot of money, but I do believe that that $25,000, you have other purposes that you could use that money for. So my belief, it's your choice on what you're going to do, and it's your choice of who you choose if you go with an appointment. But my opinion is, I would like to see an appointment. Thank you very much.
Just a quick question, just historical to context. You've been on the board for how long?
On the school board?
Yeah.
30 years.
At one point, weren't you also appointed to fill a vacancy?
I was.
And how long was that before, how long was the vacancy? How long were you on to fulfill the rest of the term?
5 months.
Okay, thank you.
And one of the things that they said was so important for me and for the members that were interviewed, they wanted to know if you were going to run in the next election, which was coming up in 5 months. And everyone that was interviewed said that they would run.
Okay, thank you, Mr. O'Donnell.
You're welcome.
Next speaker, please.
Those are all the speakers on this item.
Thank you very much. Okay, we are inside the rail at this point, and just by my math, let's see, we had a total of 11 speakers in favor of appointment. We had a total of 5 speakers in favor of elect. Out of those 16 speakers, only 3 people were from District 3 by my count, 2 of which were for appointment and 1 was for an election, just to make, can somebody double check my math? Is that what you had? Okay, I just wanted to share that. Okay, we are inside the rail. Before us tonight is a decision on direction to staff. If that's what we're going to do tonight, is to either appoint or elect. And Mr. August, you're up first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me to go first. I want to thank everybody in the audience for coming forward with their opinions. Actually, they're all valid. There is no right or wrong answer here. I do especially appreciate and want to thank all of you who've come forward tonight to honor and say kind words about Mr. Edgerton. I share your love and your gratitude and your affection and respect for him and what he has meant to you and our city. For me, he was a larger-than-life figure. His vast background in both public and the private sector helped steer the city from birth. His wit, easygoing repartee, and charm framed what I consider to be an amazing life. There are few resumes or life experiences that can match his. He will be in my Hall of Fame, and I will always reserve a front row seat for him. There will be much more, as Mr. Mayor said today, there will be much more to say about him when the family and the city come together to choose a time and place for a memorial event or a celebration to his life. Please, let us keep his forever cherished and truly beloved wife, Judy, his 3 daughters and 1 granddaughter, in our prayers and thoughts while they work through the challenges of this very difficult time and personal loss. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to take about a minute and a half, and I will make a motion to later be agendized, if I can get a second to be agendized at the next council meeting.
You have the floor.
Thank you. Of course, I know all of us on the council tonight are sorry to have to take up the responsibility of filling Mr. Edgerton's council seat for the remainder of his term. There are several options available to us, as our city attorney provided for us tonight. We can leave his seat, well, we can't leave his seat unfilled, but we can appoint an interim replacement or have an election.
As most of you are aware, and you've heard tonight, Mr. Edgerton, with a letter to the council and several people in the audience and the staff, made his wishes known, should he have to suddenly resign, or now, in this case, pass away while still in office. I'm not going to read the entire letter, but the subject was, in the event he was unable to fulfill his term, and I quote, I would hope the city council give my choice of succession serious consideration should they choose to appoint the next council member to fulfill my term, or should the citizens of Menifee need to make the decision because the council prefers to pay the expense for a general election. Then I would hope the citizens would also give me the same consideration, unquote. Mr. Edgerton, in his letter, as has been stated tonight, provided 3 names. Chris Thomas, his planning commissioner, and Rick Croy, to be considered Rick Croy and Lisa Sobek, giving reasons and qualifications for each individual. Mr. Edgerton qualifies his message by stating that there were 1,000 good council candidates in District 3. He offers these names, Chris, Lisa, and Rick, because it is important for the citizens of Menifee to have people on their city council who truly wish to serve. And all 3 of his selections have repeatedly demonstrated a willingness and dedication to do just that. In speaking with Chris Thomas, as Ms. Sanchez mentioned tonight, he informed he would prefer not to be included at this time as a consideration. Rick Croy told me he would not turn it down should he be appointed, but he would prefer to remain with his position with Park Trails and Recreation for the time being. Lisa Sobek expressed to me she would be honored with the appointment, and it could not mean more or have a higher distinction in that it is Mr. Edgerton's council seat she would be filling, a man and a servant she greatly admired and respected. Everyone on this council knows the contributions Ms. Sobek has made to this city, so there should be no doubt about her qualifications, her abilities, her dedication, and love for this city. That being said, and in Mr. Edgerton's name, his judgment, and his last request from his fellow council members, and in memory of his exalted service to this city, I make the motion. I will make, let's see, stand by, Mr. Dunn. Okay, I will make the motion that her name be put in nomination to fill Mr. Edgerton's remaining term to be agendized for the next meeting, and I would look for a second from one of my council members for that.
Okay. There's a motion to agendize. Now, just a clarification of the motion. Understand that you're favoring Commissioner Sobek for the appointment. Do you intend to do you want to alter the motion to have an appointment, or do you want to just have an agenda next meeting to talk
Well,
about it?
I'm going to ask Mr. Melching to step in, but my understanding of what Mr. Melching says is I can't ask for a vote on her
Right, that's true.
nomination
I
tonight.
agree with that.
But he
right.
said I could make a motion to agendize my motion for the next meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
And that is your motion?
That is my motion.
Is there,
I'm
there's a
looking
motion
for
on the
second.
floor. Is there a second on that motion for this evening? Is there a second on that motion to agendize at a future meeting for that appointment? Hearing no second, that motion fails on the floor. Moving on to the business at hand, thank you for those very deeply and heartfelt comments. You articulated quite well his email to us and the content of that letter. And it was very well done, Mr. August. Thank you very much. And I'm sure that when it comes time for us to share some other thoughts publicly at a memorial service, that they'll be equally as poignant as those. So tonight we have a decision, or not, based upon Mr. August's motion that just didn't get a second. We have before us tonight, do we want to appoint or do we want to have a special election? That's what's before us tonight. We are faced with a timeline here, as articulated by the city attorney. The timeline is compounded by the fact that we changed our municipal code to have no meetings in the month of July. And so with that setup, is there any discussion about which direction we want to head? Mr. Leesmeyer.
Thank you. My condolences first do go out to the Edgerton family. I've had some time to think about what I'd say here tonight. I was one of over half a dozen residents who threw their name in the mix when Councilman Fred Twyman passed away. I favored an appointment over an election for the simple fact that the cost associated was just too much, and I didn't want the city to waste the money. Sue Christensen got the nod, and from that point forward, she had an uphill battle. I believe she's a terrific woman, and she really was dealt the raw deal. The behind-the-scene politics that took place in the council at that time turned a great woman into just another face in the crowd. My hat's off to Sue for continuing to fight. She's gone on to bring the Boys and Girls Club to what it is today, and she is still very active in the community and many other programs. Having just come off of a tough campaign myself, I now have a different opinion of appointments and serving the people. There's nothing quite like knocking on someone's door and asking for their support. To really be a servant of the public, I believe you need to earn it. You need to get out there and you need to listen to the people, listen to their concerns, and ultimately earn their vote. As an elected official, it's important to remember who got you here, and you need to remember to always continue to serve the people. By making an appointment, I believe that we're overstepping the grounds and taking a decision away from the people of that district. Some will say that it's not fair. And that someone would just have to run a campaign again in a year's time in order to be reelected. But to those people, I'll say that once you're here and elected, you need to remember that you have a unique advantage over anyone else. You need to remember you have a year to prove yourself, and you will have the title of incumbent. Don't dismiss that. It's very powerful. In closing, I do support sending this off to the people for them to decide. Wally was behind the districting of this city that divided the leadership among the 4 districts. I do not profess to represent those residents of that district, and therefore I do not want to take away their voice. So for those reasons, I would support that we send this off to an election.
Okay. Mr. Denver, do you have any comment?
I do. I've been arguing this with myself since, for months. And I could argue very easily that the one-year nature of this appointment is very tough on a person. They're going to have to serve for 1 year, or let's say if they have an election, the cost of that election is substantial. And that they have to come up with, or others have to come up with, the amount of work is substantial. And then they have to turn around and do it again in a year. All that you said is true. They have an advantage. Like I say, I can argue both sides of this. They have an advantage. They also, you do need to get out there and get in front of the people to know what you think about things. I understand that. See, it's both sides of it. The other thing, though, is that $25,000 for the election, we could really use that on roads. We really could use that on 1/10 of another cop. I don't know, but we could use that for something. So that's one argument. On the other hand, I've changed. My position now is going along with what you said and what Sue said. I really don't want to appoint somebody with the fear that it may give them a blight that they are our person and they will have to suffer with that for a year, as it did with Sue, and quite unfairly. She did a fine job. Arguing the other side, Lisa Sobek would be a great council person. There's nothing wrong. Her devotion to the city is 100%. I can argue that. But on the other hand, I think the argument is that we should give the people a chance and give them an opportunity to vote, even though they have to vote again in a year. So that's my opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Denver. Mr. August, do you have an additional? I'm going to share something that not many of you, in fact, maybe just 3 people in this room know, but back in 2011 when Mr. Twyman passed, I was out of town when the council, because I was off the council at the time. Mr. Furman had beat me in that re-election campaign, and I called Wally. I called Wally from Illinois, and I said, I know there's probably going to be a dozen or so people that apply for this position, but I want you to consider something. I said, I know the voters defeated me in that district election, but consider the fact the duration of the appointment is such that, and we had switched to district elections, there's no way that had you guys appointed me to fulfill the unexpired term of Mr. Twyman, I could not legally have run for re-election in that seat because I don't live in that district at the time. So it was an intense conversation. I'll never forget. And Wally, you know how Wally talks, Scott, you know, I can only get 2 votes for you. And and then I talked to Ms. Christensen about it, and we, you know, Ms. Christensen and I have a history with youth sports leadership in the community. And she called me and said, Scott, are you going to apply? And this was a Thursday afternoon. Do you remember that conversation? I said, I'm not going to apply. Why don't you go for it? I mean, because you had ran as part of the original council and the incorporation election. You're an official candidate. Why don't you see what you can do? And you got the appointment. So in that regard, I wasn't on the council, but I did have a little bit of experience with that particular process. So, man, there's been a lot of great arguments, pro and con, here tonight on both ways. I would like, in addition to the speakers here tonight, point out that I was the one that I did ask, and he graciously did it for me. Mr. Spoon put up on Menifee 24/7 that straw poll, and granted, I completely understand that that is not a scientific poll, and I completely understand that there's no way to discern whether that's District 3 or whatever. But as of 5:15 this afternoon, there were 113 in favor of appointment, and there were 111 in favor of an election. So I was particularly moved by the speaker who talked about the price of freedom being very, very high, and it really shouldn't be about the money, it should be about the democracy. I thought that was a very, very great comment. There was also a speaker that talked about governing by manipulation. That comment bothered me a little bit, because whether it's an appointment or whether it's an election, I don't see anybody on this body governing by manipulation. And with respect to some of the other speakers who shared their thoughts, we hope that you, the council, gives serious consideration to Mr. Edgerton's names. And I can assure you, I talked to Wally almost every other day since December, since he got sick again. Some days were good, some days were bad. Some days he could talk lengthy, some days he couldn't. But I assure you, when he shared that letter and his request with us, I gave it very, very serious consideration. Ms. Sobek is my planning commissioner appointment. She's done some remarkable things in this community, and she is a community leader. And I would ask the city clerk if you would put up that one slide that I sent you earlier today. I want to share this slide just to make a point. Look at all these community leaders that live in District 3 who could possibly be potential applicants for an appointment or possible candidates for an election. Commissioner Sobek, Commissioner Thomas, Commissioner Croy, Trustee Ulibarri, Trustee Freeman, Trustee Twyman, Carolyn Twyman, Trustee Zimmerman, Mr. Sullivan, Matt Duarte, who just got appointed to the Valley-wide Park and Rec, former trustees Cronky and Phoebe Irie, former Councilwoman Kenzie lives in District 3, Robert Masson, the current president of the Riverside Sheriff's Association, lives in our community. There's Chamber of Commerce members, there's retired military, there's business people, there's active and retired public safety, and many, many, many others. How can I possibly appoint from a list like this? I just can't. I agree with some. I mean, when you look at President Washington's quote down there from his farewell address from 1796, the basis of our political systems is the right of the people to make and to alter their constitutions of government. Not the Constitution, constitutions in the makeup of the government, and in this case, the local government of Menifee. I too am in favor of an election. I think that I only share these names up here as a point of discussion, not suggesting that to any of these fine people leave their respective boards or what have you. That's not what I'm suggesting. It's merely a talking point. I agree with a comment that was talked about running for the election. You know what? If you want to be on the council, you should pull papers, you should get the signatures, you should pay your filing fee and your ballot statement, and you should go knock on doors. Let the residents of District 3 make the selection, not us up here. The city of Temecula went through this recently. They had 24 applicants. Their city's at large. I talked to Councilmember Nagar and Mayor Comerchero both, and they said it would have cost us $150,000 to do an election. In their case, they appointed. Marietta appointed because they had a short appointment. They had 6 months left. They found somebody who would step up for that 6 month and promise that he wasn't going to run for re-election.
And he did.
And he didn't. He made good on that word. Menifee's different. We're unique. We got a mayor at large. We have 4 districts. Monetarily, financially, the cost of the election is substantially less. It's a fourth of what it would be citywide. And although there were only 16 speakers here tonight, there's approximately 21,250 residents in District 3. Not all of them are registered voters, but you know what? I can't speak for them on who they're going to have sit up here with us. And so for all of those reasons, I'm going to support an election tonight, should there be a motion to do that. Are there any additional discussions or points to be made this evening about this topic? Is there a motion to move forward and give direction to staff on a resolution?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Leesmeyer to go send this to an election. Is that your motion?
Yes, sir.
Okay, just to clarify for the record, and you seconded that. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
May I repeat what I believe the motion was?
Please.
For staff to return on June 17th with the necessary paperwork to start the process of a special election? Is that what I understand?
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember August?
Excuse me, I know I can't make a comment right now, and I'm not going to, Mr. Mayor, but respectfully, I'm not going to make a comment. No.
So your vote is no?
That is correct.
Okay. And Councilmember Leesmeyer?
Aye.
And Mayor Pro Tem Denver? And Mayor Mann?
Aye.
Thank you.
District 3 will have an election. On to the next agenda item, city attorney reports. Mr. Milching. I think this is long awaited by Mr. Mayor Pro Tem Denver.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We actually have a slide, I think, that we're going to put up. I have a one-slide presentation. This is a report back on a recurring condition that is occurring off of Highway 74. It has to do with this fence. It's the green fence that's in this image, and the fact that over time, that fence continues to experience damage. Most of the damage is experienced by virtue of vandalism. Sometimes it is experienced by virtue of car accidents. It seems that when the issue is vandalism, what's happening is that residents that live on the other side of the railroad tracks that are depicted in that image are coming through the fence and across Highway 74 to a liquor store that is on the other side of Highway 74. That seems to be the principal motivation for the vandalism. And the objective here is to see if there's anything we can do to keep that fence in a better state of repair. So in order to get to that objective, I want to talk about first a little bit about property ownership and then a little bit about background. With regard to property ownership, it is that's obviously railroad right-of-way, and that is RCTC controlled and owned property where the railroad tracks are. The gray fence, I don't know if you can see in that image, there are actually 2 fences there. There's a gray fence or a metallic colored fence that's immediately behind the green fence. And the gray fence is a Caltrans-owned fence that is on Caltrans property. The green fence, which is the fence that we're trying to keep in a better state of repair, that fence is actually the fence itself is owned by EDA, but it is on Caltrans property. So it's a unique sort of a dual ownership circumstance. The dirt is Caltrans and the fence is EDA. Now, historically, what happened was that fence was originally put up by the redevelopment agency, by the Riverside County Redevelopment Agency. The idea was that the RDA was going to take care of it, maintain it with redevelopment agency dollars. When redevelopment dissolution came along, the responsibility for the fence was transferred from the redevelopment agency to the EDA. And the EDA inherited at that point in time 20 replacement panels. A panel, just for point of reference, is the amount of fence that goes between two posts. And so the EDA inherited from the RDA, sorry about the alphabet soup, 20 of these panels. That was in or about April, I'm trying to make sure I have my notes right here, that was in or about June of 2012. Each one of the panels, when a panel is replaced, costs $824, actually about $825. And it took 22 months to expend all 20 of the panels. They were all gone by April of 2014. So the total cost in terms of panels, and that includes, labor and installation, the total cost expended over that period of time would have been about $16,500. The simple fact of the matter is that now that the EDA is out of panels, the county is unwilling to make appropriations to do further repairs to the fence. EDA isn't going to put more dollars, they would probably be county general fund dollars, into that endeavor. And so the fence has become in an increasing state of disrepair. And in fact, there was a discussion about it. I looked on Google Maps tonight and just sort of followed down along the fence, and I saw easily 6 panels that were missing. Some have reported that the number might be as high as 10 panels. So that sort of brings us to the doorstep of the question that's before us. But before I get to that, one more observation. Apparently, Valleywide does an assessment. A portion of its property assessment is supposed to be devoted toward maintaining the public right-of-way that exists on 74 between Winchester and the 215, which would include this property. And the annual assessment for fiscal year 2013-2014, which is the one that we looked at, was about $80,000. So there are Valleywide dollars that are at least arguably attributable to this piece of property. I want to make sure that I temper that fact a little bit. We have not ascertained how those $80,000 are being spent. And so there's no accusation that the $80,000 are being misspent. But what we know in point of fact is that they're not being spent on this fence. Okay. So that brings us to the question that really Councilman Denver put before us, Mayor Pro Tem Denver put before us, and that is, okay, what can we do in this circumstance? And effectively we have 3 choices. The first choice would be to make an appeal to the county, a request to the county. It could come from the whole of the council, to say this is becoming increasingly a public nuisance. Having this fence in a state of disrepair is dangerous. It's allowing people to cross railroad right-of-way property, and we are appealing to you to protect the public health and the aesthetic that goes with it, and get the fence fixed at your expense because it's your fence. That's one option. Another option would be for this council to do 2 things. So it's 2A and 2B of our second option. 2A would be to make an appropriation so that we would come forth with the funding necessary for the panels and then the installation and the labor that's associated with that. And then 2B for that would be that we would need to fashion agreements. And really in this circumstance, we'd need 2 agreements, one with Caltrans, who owns the dirt, and one with the county, who owns the fence, to allow us to do that repair work and frankly, to make sure that in the course of doing that repair work, the city didn't visit upon itself a liability. So that would be one, that's a second option. And then a third option that's that's related to that is to try and leverage volunteer resources in the community for either the labor for the installation of the fence or for the purchase of the panels or for both, in which case the city could either act effectively as a facilitator, so take a volunteer organization and get them introduced to the county and to Caltrans to help them formulate those agreements, or the city could work as an intermediary where it had an understanding with the volunteer organizations and had agreements with Caltrans and the county. I would point out that if a volunteer organization were to work directly with the county and Caltrans, that there could be some challenges for them in terms of procuring adequate insurance for them to be able to do this type of work in the public right-of-way. So I know none of those options are perfect, but I did want to take some time, and I appreciate the council's patience in allowing me to lay it out and put in front of you some options with regard to the fence. And with that, unless there are other questions, that's the end of my staff report.
Mr. Leesmeyer?
You said Valleywide had an assessment of about $80,000 for that area?
That's correct.
What is that assessment for? Is that just the portion allocated for right-of-way, or is that to go to more regional type things? And what is the take from that? What is the boundary of that assessment?
So as you know, Valleywide, they maintain parks and they also maintain parkways, roadway right-of-way. Okay. And there is an engineer's report for the Valleywide assessment in this area that indicates that for the roadway right-of-way maintenance, between Winchester and the 215, a certain portion of the overall assessment is devoted to that, and the engineer's report indicates that that is $79,633 per year, or at least for fiscal year 13-14. There's no reason to believe it's substantially higher or lower than that today.
Okay, so the assessment is actually larger than 80,000, but for the right-of-way portion, it's 80,000 alone.
That's correct.
Okay, so it's conceivable to say that we have a breakdown that shows what is supposed to be being spent there. Does Valleywide provide us with something that says what they are spending the money on?
That's the point where, you know, we've made some efforts to get data on that subject, but that is the point where our knowledge ends and where more knowledge could be had.
So no.
So no, we don't know. That's what I'm saying. We don't know.
So I guess, I don't mean to go off topic, but how do we reconcile figuring out where our residents' tax money is being spent?
Well, there are a number of mechanisms to do that, and we can make a Public Records Act. Obviously, the easiest way to do that is to have a conversation, a consensual conversation. And our indications from our consensual conversations from Valleywide is that it's their position that this fence is not their responsibility. And, you know, they have a credible point of view there because this fence is on Caltrans' own property and owned by the county, right? So it's a fair point of view, but it's one that would need to be validated.
Okay.
Perhaps there's a fourth option worth exploring, and I don't know how it could be done, but in the alphabet soup mix here, there's also an RCTC factor, because that rail is owned by BNSF. I believe it's BNSF. And RCTC has lease agreements with BNSF because that is the next Metrolink line going from Paris into San Jacinto, the San Jacinto Valley. So there may be, while the county may own the land, at some point the county's not going to own the land. And so maybe through staff, we can have one meeting with RC, just pulse them and see what they would be willing to do as part of the long-term project of the San Jacinto line. And then, I mean, because I understand what you said, Mr. Melching, about Caltrans owning a portion, EDA owning a portion, et cetera, et cetera. And then also, I guess we could talk to Supervisor Ashley as our 5th District rep and have him talk to EDA. And between EDA and Valleywide and RCTC, maybe we can come up with a memorandum of understanding between agencies to throw some money at this problem for a foreseeable future until the line actually gets built. I think there is a huge safety factor. I know there's an aesthetic issue, but there's also a public safety thing here because people are purposely cutting that fence to get between the neighborhood, to get to the park, to get to the elementary school, to get to the new grocery store, instead of using the crosswalk at the light. And so, you know, if somebody gets hurt we don't own it as the city, but we're gonna be named in a suit, to be sure. There's no doubt about it. So that would be my fourth option, is to maybe explore, before we go any further, is to check with our CTC, see if there's another way. But I don't know how the others feel about that.
Yeah, whatever it takes. I mean, I think I already made it clear that if Valleywide's on the hook for it, let's hold them accountable, but that's a great idea. It's another option.
I think your idea, the ideas being presented here are excellent. Why don't we encourage our city attorney to hold those meetings, Ashley, Valleywide, the other owners, particularly having to do with that train that's going to be eventually going all the way to Hemet, San Jacinto, and let's see what you come back with a report.
Mr. Johnson?
Might I suggest in a cost-saving measure that I call in mayor
Yes.
of RCTC and just have a discussion that way to start it out? Would that be
Call
acceptable?
them mayor?
And Mayor, the
and Mayor.
director of our.
No, I don't have a problem with that. I was just hoping that Ashley was in on it and others.
We can facilitate a meeting.
That's fine.
So-
And then report back at a time certain, a month or 2 or 3.
Definitely.
Well, I certainly know a lot more than I did before about what's going on with that fence. And so there's options, there's ways, so good. Thank you very much, Mr. Melching.
You're welcome, my pleasure.
I'm sure Mr. Denver appreciates it too.
Very much.
Does that conclude your report?
It does, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. We do have an update tonight, economic developmentally, from Jeff Wyman, our Economic Development Director, regarding our recent trip in ICSC.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Just wanted to give you a short update and recap on the city's recent trip to ICSC, which is the International Council of Shopping Centers. On the 17th through the 20th, the trade show was held in Las Vegas, and the city's economic development team went out there to have a booth and to take part in the trade show. The trade show is the main portion of it is a 3-day event, which is the largest retail industry convention, holding over 35,000 attendees and 1,000 exhibitors. It incorporates 3 full floors of the Las Vegas Convention Center, and I can proudly say that we walked all of it.
Yep.
Only one of us had blisters, though.
That's true.
That's the new guy.
That's true. I think he had new shoes on.
I worked harder, what can I tell you?
As I said, the city again had our professional trade show booth at the convention. This gives the city a professional presence and allows an extended outreach to reach out to retailers, restaurants, hotels, and all the people that are attending the trade show. It allows us to positively market the city and, importantly, to meet one-on-one with businesses and their representatives. Some of the objectives of the trip were to meet with key retail, restaurant, and hospitality representatives, build relationships with those businesses, and I have at the bottom here, it's kind of hard to read because it's small, but it was important. I came across it recently. It's a quote from Brad Umansky, who is the president of Progressive Retail Partners. And he had written something last week regarding the ICSC trade show, and it says, despite all the technology, personal contact still matters. And it was a very important part of our trade show experience, was to be able to meet with these representatives one-on-one, to be able to plant the seed that Menifee is a great place to be, to build those relationships, and to encourage them to be able to open their businesses here in the city. The end goal, of course, was to attract quality commercial development to the city. Some of the quality businesses that the economic development team met with was Costco, Home Depot, Rubio's, Roadrunner Sports, Dave & Buster's, multitude of hotels. We met with many developers, a lot that actually walked by and started up conversations with us at our booth. Some of the cities in the area didn't have a booth, and they were there just to have meetings. I think that we had a leg up on them from the aspect that we actually held meetings, were able to hold them at our booth, and be able to get those walk-by people that were interested in our city and to spark interest in the city ongoing. All that said, I'm sorry, one of the other aspects that I wanted to note was that there's a lot of preparation that comes into going to one of these trade shows. There's registration, shipping, and setting up of the booth. Travel plans have to be made. I want to thank Tara Manger for setting up all our travel plans, because that was a huge help. Pre-contacting of the businesses for meetings and follow-ups. Our economic development team did an outstanding job and really stepped up to the plate. All that said, it was well worth the effort, and we made significant progress over the years in going to ICSC trade shows. Some of the positive outcomes that we've had from previous trips and continue to do so. Previous trips, we talked with Krikorian movie theaters, convinced them to commit to coming to the city. BJ's Restaurants, Panera Bread, Applebee's, Party City, Buffalo Wild Wings is coming, Five Guys is here, Sonic Drive-In. So we've made a lot of progress over the years, and that said, we have over 500,000 square feet of retail centers that are moving forward in our city right now, some that are constructing as we speak. And so it's been a really great thing to work on, and it's great to see some of that come to fruition. Of course, one of the main benefits of this is an increase in long-term revenues. So the revenues from these projects will exceed or get into the hundreds of thousands of dollars in the short term, and over a 10-year term will be in the millions of dollars in revenue to the general fund on a long-term basis. And this will continue to grow as the city continues to grow, attracts new businesses, which provides additional funding for essential services such as fire, police, and infrastructure projects. That concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions.
Mr. Leesmeyer.
I just want to make a brief comment. I didn't mean to say that I worked harder. You know, you guys really busted your asses. I was along for the ride, and it was a really great trip. I was really impressed by the lineup of the meetings that we had. A lot of really positive feedback. Those people that just walked by the booth and just said, "Hey, I'm looking to build a..." God, who was that guy? I can't remember who he was now. I think it was a Wendy's. Looking to build a Wendy's over off Newport Road. We're Arby's. That guy was so fired up, and as soon as he saw that we were there, he said, "Menifee, I know where Menifee is. I want to go to Menifee. What do I got to do to go to Menifee?" I mean, that was great.
Those gentlemen were here today. We gave them a tour. They came down from Seattle.
Nice.
Awesome. I mean, those were excellent. So thank you guys for all the work you put into that. Really, it was great. I look forward to another one. Great job.
I want to echo those same comments. I know 2015, having attended ICSC in 2009, from there to now, it's not even a comparison. And the momentum that your team has from an economic development standpoint, Mr. Johnson, Julie, Gina Gonzalez, you, Brian Ullman, and others who may have worked on setting it all up, getting us all the appointments, we know that the seeds that get planted in previous years, you got to water those, and ultimately they start growing, and then you can cultivate that. And that's what's happening right now. And from this trip, just like the Arby's, I mean, I know that there are people who are coming that we can't announce because we've been sworn to secrecy and non-disclosure agreements and whatnot, but there's going to be some announcements coming forward in the coming weeks and months ahead, and so we all look forward to those. Great job. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, and Mr. Wyman. Thanks for your program that you've put together for us. I was just going to piggyback on exactly what you said, and kind of liken it to two things. You've mentioned making sausage, you know, an infrastructure projects like making sausage. It's not a fun process, but the end result tastes pretty good. Our approach to economic development over time has been really honed and focused by Jeff's leadership, and not only just the contacts that he took from 2009 and 10 when he got here, but formulating those relationships over time is really the key, because he doesn't take no for an answer. We've met with several of those folks that he's shown on the screen since he got here and created a plan for us. And some folks might think, well, you know, wow, you talked to Arby's or you talked to Wendy's, or we didn't set those appointments. They came to us. Our appointments are focused on retail commercial development, and what we're finding is that those folks that have restaurants and that have, I would use the term lightly, upper scale fast food with Arby's or Sonic, they come to us and they come ask where can we put them or put them in connection with. So along the lines of like a true capital improvement project or a 5-year capital improvement project, you know, you got to design and plan, you got to build the specs, you got to perform the environmental, you got to secure the locations for these folks. You have to connect them with the developer. That developer's got to agree to a certain price range. They got to buy, just facilitating every single one of those pieces as we move forward. And the end result is the fact that we benefit with that 1% sales tax. That's really our biggest, greatest opportunity to improve the other amenities around town. The streets get fixed, the officers get hired, the fire department gets a new piece of equipment. I mean, that's really our economic driver. So thanks to you, Jeff. Thanks for the marketing that you've done, for the program you've put together, and for those that you've attracted so far. And do you have something to tell us tonight?
Unfortunately, I cannot announce it yet. But we
Okay,
do have,
so what we did was we contacted the person that told us a
4
very
weeks.
important deal in ICSC, and I asked Jeff, maybe you could just call and see if we can talk about it. And no. And so I guess we can't say it yet.
June 17th, we want to know.
hopefully
Or
soon.
we would love to bring that back on June 17th. It's a much needed requested amenity throughout the city, so we'd be very excited to share that. But thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Thank you for those kind words. And I just want to make sure I thank the economic development team because they were instrumental in making this a very successful event.
Thank you, thank you. It's all you guys.
You know, I want to say one thing. You guys, we sit here and go through all this, and then the people come up and scream and yell because we spend money going to these conferences. This is what you got. I didn't go. I was going to go, but I didn't want to go because I didn't want everybody screaming and yelling. And you guys went. You spent, what, $50,000, $25,000, $10,000, whatever it was, and you're going to bring back a whole bunch of business. And I think we need to stop listening to the people who are yelling about nickels, and we ought to worry about the dollars.
Thank you, Mr. Wyman. On to, is that, City Manager, do you have any more reports tonight? No. Thank you. Future agenda requests from council members. Gentlemen, do you have anything? You're up first, Mr. Leesmeyer.
I have no agenda requests. I just wanted to echo your comments from the workshop, thanking staff and Rob for making those cuts regarding the work and then budget work and continuing to fight to do more with less. I did want to make one announcement. I did find a new planning commissioner. He's a man by the name of Mark Doty. Works for a local engineering firm, has a long background in engineering and planning. And he actually did take office last Wednesday. So he is currently seated on the Planning Commission. And I showed up that night on a night bike ride and walked in, and sure enough, he was sitting here and he's going through his agenda, and he was doing a pretty good job. So he's here.
Well, congrats. Mr. August.
Real quickly, Mr. Mayor, to the staff. At the last council meeting, I believe you seconded direction to the staff on my part where the staff was going to look into kind of what's going on, if anything, over at the church on the corner of McCall. And somebody brought it to my attention today. It wasn't listed on future agenda items, and you had mentioned that we're going to give them some time, Greg, the staff, and of course I concurred and agreed with that. But I just want to ask the staff that we haven't forgotten that. It will be on the agenda sometime down the future.
Meyer, I forgot to list it,
don't
but
worry
I
about it.
sent an email out to all staff members to remind them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I have one request that's not for the council yet, but if I could get a second on this, I have a request, and maybe you've already addressed it, but for the Parks and Recs and Trails Commission, I had a meeting with Commissioner Zimmerman, who's also on the Menifee Valley Historical Society and the Arts Council, and they've mapped out some historical sites throughout the city, and they've done some research on some monumentation, whether it be a sign or a concrete monument, and it's gotten a lot of traction from them, and also to the point where Supervisor Ashley said that he would match the city dollar for dollar if we wanted to implement this program. And I think if, you know, being conscious of the general fund and not having encroachment on the general fund, maybe, I don't know, maybe this is a good expenditure for our parks diff, I don't know. But I don't know if you've already talked to them about this, but if I could get a second maybe from one of you to send this to the Parks and Recs Commission for them to discuss and try to move it forward and see if it's a good idea, and if not, then it won't come back. Mr. August? Okay,
Yeah, I would second it.
okay. Is that okay for you, Mr. Lennox?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. No other items, no other comments? We stand adjourned in honor and memory of Council Member Wallace Wayne Edgerton III.